whilst we're waiting, just a question from what we have gone through. Does it make sense for you guys? Does it relate to anything that you've been exposed to during your working career? Is it relevant? Let's just say, is it relevant? Are you guys there?
Morning, Nala. We are here.
Okay. I'll ask the question whilst we're waiting for 9:10 to say, from whatever we've gone through, is it relevant to your?
Yes, it is. As much as well, I'm not directly involved in human resource, but most of the things make sense.
Okay. For the other guys, in what way do you see the relevance of what we've gone through so far? If there's any relevance.
Good morning, Lata.
Morning, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So
I
I answer the question. We're still experiencing this that we're having yesterday. Can you please try and get you actually to us?
Bright, you're breaking. Do you mind repeating your statement?
I'm saying we still have a problem of echo that we had yesterday. So can you try maybe your special assistant? Because it's but it only affects when we as assistants are talking, but when you are talking, we fine.
I'm not sure. Okay. Let me just ask Vitali. Vitali, are you there? Doesn't the echo happen maybe because of the environments that we're in? Because I remember yesterday we all had to log out and we logged in, and then it had changed, right? We didn't need IT to check anything. So unless maybe can you guys log in from your portal? Don't log in from your meeting link.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Try that and see if it's gonna change. And then we'll see. Sorry for that. Vitali? Okay, Vitali will respond to us when he's available. Good morning, everyone. I see it's 9:10. I think we can start, and then the other guys will join as we're going, so that at least we don't delay the guys that were here on time. I hope you're all doing well, despite everything that happens in life. But yeah, you're alive. That's the first blessing. The other stuff, we will sort it out. So this is day 2 of Human Resource Management for your National Diploma in Public Administration. Just to do a summary, if you guys can remember, what did we go through yesterday? Just in brief, if you still recall some of the areas that we discussed yesterday, so at least we know we're on the same page, and whatever you can remember from yesterday's conversations, from the 3 sections we went through, what do you remember? Even one word, one statement, what do you recall from all the conversations we had yesterday? Come on, guys. Anything? Or you guys gonna mute me? Any thought that you have? No one is gonna say, "Oh, that was wrong." It's about just sharing your what you remember, really, just to try and also train our minds to always grasp something from the classes that we have. Yes, let's not go now.
Hi, Lala. May I probably suggest that we go through a summary from your side and then we make it interactive from then on? Because I think the pointers from your summary will kind of pave the way for interactions.
Ideally, yes, you know what? That's a good idea. But I also want to hear from you guys. You know, to say, okay, if you're put in any situation and you're asked to say, oh, by the way, what did you discuss yesterday? You're able to pick out something from the conversation, like it just being from one side. Because it also helps in you guys training yourselves to say, okay, in every conversation that I'm gonna go through or training our brains, there's something that I need to grasp for future reference. You know, it shouldn't be just a conversation where it's just going in and out. We should be able to at least remember a few concepts or just a few of the areas that we discussed yesterday. So from your side, anything, guys, what do you remember? We went through 3 sections. We discussed various areas from yesterday. What did you pick up? What do you remember from there? I know you guys are now flipping through your study guides. Nothing at all, guys. Yes, Gladys.
Good morning.
Morning, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm fine, thank you.
What I've been is the issue of human resource planning, as well as the link issue of the legislation when you do the planning in HR.
Okay. Thank you so
Yes.
much. All right, thank you so much. Okay, we have one person that's thank you guys. So just just make it a habit whenever we go through stuff in your own time or the times that I've said, okay, guys, go and go through your activities to say, okay, flip through and just see what are the different concepts that we've gone through. Like from yesterday, we went through the introduction of human resources, trying to understand what is human resources, what role it plays in terms of how we manage the relationship between the employee and the employer, how legislation comes in, what is it important for in terms of human resources, what legislation has the government put in place to try and also help in managing that relationship from your Public Service Administration Act to your Labor Relations Act, what is your Basic Conditions of Employment Act, what is the Skills Development Act, what are all those acts, and how do we then incorporate them in managing the people element in the organization, and also saying that from that legislation, it's also important for employees, right, to say, do they understand the purpose of the legislation and their rights within that agreement, how it plays an important part in managing the relationship. We also went through the human resource management model, where we saw the different areas that human resources has to look at in terms of their functions, from managing diversity, from skills development, from managing administration, compensation of the organization. So in all those different elements, is trying to understand what role does HR play in terms of the organization? How is it changed in terms of being more strategic in the relationship that it has with the organization, where it has to make sure that whatever employee component that it's getting for the organization, it also contributes to the objectives of the organization. So remember, through your human resource planning, where you look at the organization's needs, right, and do an analysis to say, from the supply that we have and the demands of the organization, how do we make sure that we try and narrow down that gap in terms of the needs of the organization from the employees or the resources that it needs from a human element. And in doing that analysis, also understanding from the internal environment and the external, what are the different factors that we need to account for when you're trying to do that analysis. From the external, looking at the personal factors, where you look at your political, economic factors, the legal factors, how does it then affect in us trying to make sure that we narrow down the gap in fulfilling the recruitment needs of the organization. So just in a nutshell, that's some of the areas that we went through from yesterday, where you're supposed to make sure that from the stuff that we've gone through, you see the alignment in the human resource function. What, from your own experience, how do you then relate to them? How do you see its day-to-day use? Because remember, I said to you, with human resources, it's something that we experience on a daily. So it's not a new area. We go through human resources as an employee, as an employer, and it's just understanding in terms of the different processes that happen during that process. What are they called? How do we then define them in a theoretical framework? Nolo, are you there?
Hi, Lela. Sorry. Yeah. So,
Yes.
I had to call you my name. Apologies.
Yes. No, I'm saying, okay, I've given you the just a summary in terms of what we've gone through. From your side, is there anything else that you want to add? Because I remember you had said maybe if you give us a brief, then we can pick up from there.
No, it was just a thought as an icebreaker. I think our brains are still sleeping a bit, or we tired from the POE.
Mine is sleeping too.
So I thought it would be an icebreaker to get us having some pointers that we can deliberate on.
No. But just make it a habit to say, okay, just go through your study guides. Just even when
absolutely.
and even just for future reference, whenever you have conversations or even just do meetings, to say, okay, in a summary, what do I remember? What pointers am I going to take away from this conversation? Because yes, we speak about so many things and it's a whole day session, but from there, at least you should be able to take out a few concepts that you can remember. If someone says to you, oh, by the way, yesterday we were in class, what did you guys go through? You know? But yeah, we're all learning. I'm also learning. Thank you guys. But I hope you've now woken up. You've had your cup of coffee.
A question, sorry, Lala.
Yes.
The definition of HR and the positioning, how much of that is done within the context of how corporate South Africa is positioned in line with the global trends, both from corporate and public sector?
Would you please repeat that? You said in terms of how human resources.
So the positioning of HR, and
Yes.
there's a question behind the question, but I'm not going to ask it now. In terms of interacting and the conversations that we're having with regards to HR and the different disciplines, how much of that definition is informed by the corporate trends and the public sector trends currently?
Okay. Guys, do you maybe want to jump in? So remember, in terms of what human resource has to do, right? We have to then look at what are the factors that are going to affect human resources, right? So, because remember, human resources is there to make sure it manages the people element to meet the objectives of the organization. So the different trends in terms of how we're hiring, what are the skills that are needed, how are organizations looking at employing people, or even how do they manage their offices, will determine in terms of how we then look at maybe, let's say, recruitment. To say nowadays, when you're doing recruitment with the new trends that are there, to say, okay, there's now a remote work from home, where within our recruitment we have to say, okay, with the new trends that are there for looking for people for organizations, how do we make sure that we also incorporate that new trend that is there within the external environment, so that when we are hiring, we're also speaking to the new needs of people, because everybody's out looking for, can I work from home? Am I allowed to do remote work? Because I've seen in terms of the advantages from that. So I'm now targeting organizations that offer that. So organizations that are now, that used to operate on the traditional way, have to now look at, in terms of this trend that's happened, how do we then also accommodate that? Does it work within our environment? Can we adjust our environment? Or looking at the work that is done within the different departments, is it something that won't be applicable or not? So they have to then look at how to then adjust what human resources does, and see from what is happening externally within the trends of human resources and the needs of employees, how they're changing, and bringing in different elements in terms of diversity and inclusion. How do we then accommodate all those, and how make sure that human resource still maintains meeting the objectives of the organization. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think my observation and lack of a better word, no offense to anyone, but frustration with the function itself. And if you look at, I think most of the even your top players in the market, HR is still positioned as an admin function and a paper pusher. So it's more of, do we have people that are coming to work? No, this person is naughty, therefore let's facilitate the disciplinary and a whole lot. It's not really a function that guides the what the key functions in a company ought to be doing. It's seen as a support function, and it shouldn't be that such an important science should be a support function. And going through the material yesterday, I'm picking up that it's kind of gravitating towards that, where HR is a support function, and it really should be rebranded or repositioned to be taken as a serious function that it is, so that it's able to offer the value that is actually within. So it's only HR practitioners that will understand the importance, but hardly any of them will accept the importance in boardrooms. It will be more of somebody says this, and then HR will say, no, we'll look into it. We'll talk to the employees, and so HR is always a bad cop.
So you know what? I think it all depends with the different organizations, right? To say in terms of that decentralization of authority, how is it given within organizations? Some organizations, yes, will still maintain the old culture of HR remains administrative and is not included in those discussions at the senior table. But some organizations have changed in terms of how do we then include them, by understanding that the people element is what then contributes to the success of the organization. So if we're not including the people that actually manage that function, to make sure that they give their input in terms of the type of people that are needed, or the type of training that is needed to help the organization meet its objectives, then it will still remain an administration role. So it now depends with organizations, even with departments, looking at, I'm not sure who's in the public sector, to say within the public sector, how have they seen their HR operating? Are they included in the discussions where, when it comes from at the top, do they give the ideas, or it's more of it's administration and they just do what is coming from the national level, or from what DPSS says in those discussions? Are they included, or it's just you do administration and we don't give you time to listen to your ideas? It all now just depends with how the different environments operate, because remember, yes, this is a structure that ideally everybody wants to happen across the board in terms of how HR should be, but everybody then chooses depending with the power that they have to control that function, to say how are they going to run it for their organizations. Guys, any additions on that? Do you feel HR is still administrative, or from your experience, they've moved to be more strategic and they actually play a big role in terms of how organizations have to become successful? Yes, Harry?
Good morning, colleagues. Yes, the current environmental challenges have forced many organizations to recognize HR as a strategic partner. They now want that HR intellectual to be able to scan and identify the future needs of organization. A lot is changing in our industry today. There's a 2030 plan to migrate all short courses to NPF registered courses by 2030. So meaning that there's a whole lot of work that HR must do with organization together to map a way forward that by 2030 how do we get everyone migrated to the new qualifications. Though other people might not qualify, meaning that they will exit the department with the correct course. But also, what can be done for those people that they exit as better people. So hence I'm saying that the current environmental challenges have made many organizations organization. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Gladys, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, it's raised, Lala. So what I want to say, like HR function now, yes, HR has a more administrative work than the core of the HR, but now there's something that has been developed by DPSA as a HR, they call the R forum for each and every department so that we can do the common thing. But the only thing that they make, they only pick only those people that are in a higher level, and they don't come back to give us the information in the lower level. That is our biggest challenge that we are facing in our organizations.
Okay. Thank you so much. So is that Gladys, is that then linked? Because remember, when we look at the National Development Plan for 2030, to say that in that plan, they put in also what are the strategic goals for HR, where they've said they've seen in terms of the public sector where HR needs to play a part in terms of the nation as a whole, right, or the public sector meeting its objectives. So they've realized in terms of the role that HR has to play besides the administration. Because remember, with HR, you can never run away from the papers and administration, something that has to be done in terms of, remember, keeping a record of our employees, anything that we discussed in terms of that relationship. Because remember, HR has so many functions, and in that, we have to deal with evidence. But moving away from that paper function, the public sector has also realized how do we then incorporate and change what the goals of HR has to be on a strategic level to help in terms of meeting the vision of the government. Thabo?
Yes, Lala, it is. Yeah, this is strategic. Now we are coming on to abolish all those paperwork. For an example, we have the issue of the leave before we apply via papers, which called Z1 on one something. But now we are no longer applying the leave via papers. Now we have that a link called leave, applying a leave via electronic. But the implementation of those very slowly because there is not even a proper training to the officials.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Gladys. Thabo, you want to add something? Thank you so much, guys.
Morning, Lala. On my side, everybody getting it because I can't hear. Even the lady who just spoke now, I just can't hear.
Thabo, how did you log on to into the meeting? Was it through the link or through your portal?
No, I logged through the link.
Try and log in from the portal. It might have clearer connection. And see if that makes a difference.
Hi, Lala. It actually doesn't. I logged directly through the Teams portal. There's still echo. I'm not sure if the rest of the guys can hear me clearly. Like when Thabo and Terry and the lady that just spoke right now, there's still there's an echo.
You said you logged in through the Teams.
Yeah.
Directly through Teams. That's a portal, right?
No. Go onto your student portal and connect from there. Try and see if it's different from the student portal.
But how do you connect from your student portal?
So you go to the qualification, go to the course, right? On the course, when you see the different sections, I think it's on the right.
It'll redirect you to Teams.
But from there, you're not connecting from the meeting link that you're getting on your emails. You're connecting from Teams on the portal. So try and connect from there and see if it's different.
Can hear Lishonolo clear without echo. So maybe someone connected in two devices. I don't know, but I think it's better now. And
I can hear you,
how
Tabo.
you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it
yeah,
may be the issue
yeah,
from
maybe.
yesterday, Lala, where somebody was connected through two devices. So with Teams, it doesn't matter which where you're connecting, because the meeting redirects you to Teams, which is a Microsoft services. So whether you go to a portal or the link, it takes you to that. So everyone goes into that hub.
Okay, I don't know. All right, just try and see, because I know if I connect from the different angles, I have different functions or different connectivity that comes out from my side. So it just depends in terms of how your systems are set up. But I don't see anyone that's gotten in with two devices here. But yeah, let's just see how it goes, if it changes or not. But everybody's, yeah, there's just one, everybody's on one connection. There's nobody with two logins that I can see from here. All right, thank you guys for your contributions, and yeah, just having that conversation, trying to find out how things have changed. Tab, was that an old hand?
Oh yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, just moving on, guys. So today we're going to look at performance in the public sector to understand how the issue of performance is dealt with within the public sector. What's the relevance of actually looking at our employees' performance? What role does it play within the public sector? Do we have to do performance appraisals within the public sector? Who has within your organizations, do they diligently do performance appraisals, or it's something that is not really done or is done on a need basis from your experience? Guys, from performance appraisals, the organizations diligently do performance appraisals for the employees, or it's something that really isn't done? It's just a process that has been put in the policy and hasn't actually been implemented, from your experience. Yes, Harry.
Okay, thank you very much. Where I come from, performance was compulsory. Performance management was compulsory. We made sure that even though that did not lie, then so that it is sign a contract, do a review, do a final contract. So HR emphasized compliance and actual performance. Now, in another area, they are not so dedicated into ensuring everyone completes the task. But also the understanding of performance management differs from one manager. Some employees will give an extra cash profit. Managers also do it for compliance as long as the file is done. That's it. They will see you during review and see you again during final. Happens during the year. It doesn't matter to anyone. So that is where we are. Very worried.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Harry. The other guys from your side? Where are you guys today? Are you guys on strike? You can't say it's cold. It's just overcast. Guys from your side? Where are you guys? You guys don't want to talk today? You can't hear me. Face says you can't. Can the other guys hear me? Because Face says she can't hear me. If you can hear me, guys, can you just do a thumbs up?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you as well.
All right, let me just.
Can hear you.
All right. Okay. I think it's just on Faye's side. Thanks, Harry, for sharing. From the other guys, if you have anything, you can always add on the chat, right? So remember with performance, right? First, you have to look at performance.
Sorry, Lala. Just apologies. We didn't hear what Harry said. Do you mind repeating it? Because you seem to be the only one who doesn't have an echo in the background. And I'm sure what he said is quite valuable and will be beneficial to us all.
All right. He was talking about how performance management within his department, how they do it sometimes, right? But in terms of actually following through with the process, it's something that still needs to be fixed, because you find that with different organizations, yes, we introduce performance appraisal for employees, but in terms of the follow-up and understanding in terms of how those responsibilities from the onset, that when you're employing a person, does the person understands in terms of expectations. Remember, performance will come in from you understanding your responsibility, right? From there, during that first discussion that you're having with your employees, this is where we're supposed to nip it in the bud to say, understand your expectations, your key performance indicators, where you're going to be rated in terms of what you're supposed to do, expectations of organizations, and the gaps that they see from what you're not doing. So with that follow-up, this is where now they need to go back and fix it, say, okay, yes, we do those appraisals, but in terms of now managing what happens beyond that is something that now they need to look at. Because you find that in all different organizations, some who have performance appraisals, but in terms of now the feedback and going from the feedback, because this is where sometimes organizations might lack, because sometimes it's done as a tick box exercise to say, okay, from all departments, you're expected to do this function, right? Where you do performance appraisals for your teams. But in terms of now saying, what is the relevance of this? What do I do beyond the performance appraisal? Is something that most managers still need to learn and also manage to make sure that that process is more effective and it delivers in terms of the expectations of the organization when incorporating performance management in its processes. From your side, Lehlongonolo, do you guys regularly do performance appraisals? Is it something that you see brings about change, or maybe it's just done to say, okay, let's tick box? It's something that's expected from the organization to say, okay, can you give me ratings of your employees when it's needed? But in terms of actually understanding what is the purpose of doing it, is it seen within your organization?
Sure. So typically what happens is our financial year end is 31st of March. So which means 1 April is a new year. But prior to that, or not prior, sorry, getting into a new year, what you do is you sit with your team, you go through the goals. So you set the goals that you both agree on. which will be followed by one-on-one sessions to see how the person is tracking on their goals. And then you have a quarterly review, followed by mid-year review, wherein you discuss the areas that are lacking, developmental areas, and obviously as a people leader, there's responsibilities that you assign to yourself to make sure that the person performs. And then you get to a final review, which is like 9 months into the year, followed by a final review. So after which you are able to collate the records from one-on-one session, quarterly reviews, and all those to form the final performance review for the year. But where you see that the person has gone down in terms of their performance, and then there's a need for HR to come in, you bring them in something that we call the PIP, poor performance improvement, which now outside of the goals that have been set, you're going to put this person on a special program where you agree on deliverables, and then you move from quarterly reviews to bi-weekly sessions with HR with a view of looking as to whether the person is improving in terms of their performance, or are they stagnant or regressing. So yeah, it's a full-on process, sometimes tedious.
Tedious. Good. Do people enjoy the process, or it's one of those where they dread and say, "Oh, not this again"?
I don't think it's something that you will enjoy, because effectively what it does to you as a people leader, it says that you are taken away from your core function to look after this particular person whose performance has lacked. So use an example of you have about 6 or 8 people that are reporting into you. The rest of the team members won't really enjoy your full attention because of you trying to get this person to improve. Failure to which obviously means that you're going to exit the person from the organization. Emotionally, it's taxing. Poor performance management is not a nice thing, because it touches into different aspects. And when HR comes in as well in their process and starts following their full-on processes, it changes the dynamics of the team. And in your team meetings every week, where you're talking to the entire team, but with one person who's not performing, and you have all these guys that are talking in sales good numbers and a whole lot, and this one particular person, obviously you know that you're taking them through a certain process. It's never a good thing.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lehlongonalo. I know the other guys all have it different within the organizations. When you guys are able to share, please just send on the chat in terms of your organizations, how they manage this process. Just taking it now to in terms of theory, right? To say when they're looking at performance management, because remember there's performance management, and then from there comes out different functions like your performance appraisals, your performance reviews, right? From now, performance management, where it looks at how we manage people within our organizations and what are the different set of practices that we need to follow. So the process that we're going to incorporate in our organizations to manage the people element, and then how do we make sure that we improve the performance of employees? Because remember, performance of employees then is directly related to the performance of the organizations. So once we're able to make sure that performance of our employees is reaching the expected levels that we need in terms of the agreements we've signed with our employees, right, in terms of our key performance agreements, then we're able to meet the organization's performance needs. So it's then very important to align expectations of from your employees to what organization wants to achieve at the end of the day, so that at least you're able to manage that performance and see where are the gaps in terms of where your employees are not performing according to what your expectations are, right? And then according to another definition where they're looking at performance management, they see it as a process, right? A process of translating the overall objectives of the organization. So remember, from the organizations, from our departments, we're supposed to set out objectives. This is what drives in terms of what we want to achieve as organizations, as departments. We're able to then see in terms of the direction that we want to go, where we speak about our visions of the organizations, the missions in terms of how we're going to get to that end result that we're looking for in terms of the organization. So we're supposed to then translate the overall objectives of the organization into objectives for the employees. So what the organization wants to achieve, right? We then have to say from the different objectives that we want to achieve, whether it's we want to make sure we maintain number one position as a health department or as a hospital, or we maintain first position in terms of our school pass rate, right? We have these different objectives that we want to achieve as an organization. From there, we're supposed to break down those objectives to say from the employees that we have, how do we make sure that everybody feeds into this objective, where everybody has to play a part, where when we go back to understanding that alignment when we look at the leadership model, the Regenesis leadership model, where we say everybody has to understand in terms of their purpose in the whole equation. What is your contribution in us achieving the end goal that we want to receive at the end of the day? So understanding to say what are the objectives of our organizations, how do we then make sure that everybody make sure that they're managing a piece of the pie where the objectives that they have to feed into the objectives of the organizations, where we're giving them responsibilities that will help us achieve those objectives. So within our different departments, even as employees, we're supposed to then understand in terms of the work that I'm doing, how is it feeding into the objectives of the organization? Where sometimes, yes, HR will sit down and explain to the to the employees in terms of this is what we want to achieve, right? Because remember, HR has to sit with the heads to say, okay, this is what we want to achieve as an organization, and then they're supposed to then feed that into either the team leaders, the supervisors, the heads of departments to say this is what has to be achieved, and then now for every person break it down, say what do you have to do on a daily to help you achieve in terms of the objectives of the organization. Are we fine so far, guys? If there are any questions, please you can let us know, right? So in terms of trying to now achieve those objectives, right, within a performance system, there are things that you then have to look out to make it successful, right? To make say, what are the different areas that I need to look out in terms of my performance systems, right? So to say that for starters, do you have a clear set performance objectives for the employees, right? So remember from the onset, when you're joining an organization or you're joining a team, right, to say when you're having that conversation with the managers, or if you're sitting down with HR, depending how it's broken down within your organizations, if you've been given objectives in terms of what you need to achieve, right? And then how do you then measure those performance, your performance against the objectives? Have you set criteria in terms of saying, okay, these are your objectives, this is now the performance that I expect from you against these objectives. What is the criteria that you're going to set? Because remember, we need to agree in terms of, at the end of the day, if I'm going to measure your performance, how are we going to measure that performance? So that at least when we're sitting down and having a conversation in terms of a person's performance, we're saying, according to the criteria that we gave, right, you're supposed to have achieved this level of either a pass rate or throughput, how many students managed to go into the next grade, or how many, in terms of a medical side, in terms of hospitals, how they would then look at in terms of their objectives, how they would measure. Is it in terms of service? It is in terms of happy clients? Is it in terms of people that have been dealt with in terms of their queries? You then set different objectives depending on the departments that you're managing, right? And then you need to identify developmental support. So from the employees, right, you've gone through objectives, you understand in terms of how you're going to measure the performance. You need to say, and then how do you make sure that you have support that you're going to include within the organization in terms of supporting the employees? Because remember, within that process, employees have to support it to say, okay, is there someone who's going to come and assist them, who's going to help them train, who's going to be mentoring them, or is it someone that's going to be responsible for them or shadow a certain person? How do you make sure that we're helping that person develop what you have within your departments to help you in terms of giving that developmental support? Because remember, some people might come with they still rule from either from tertiary education, or they're coming in and they've gone into a new role, and they still need that support in terms of them actually growing into that role. So have you put in place people that are going to help them to make sure that they get to the position or to the level that you need them to get, so that they're able to produce the the various performance objectives that you have for your organization. And then from that, you need to make sure that you also review the process, right? Just make sure that you're developing performance of the employees from the process that you've instilled and said, this is how we're going to manage the whole process of performance. You're supposed to then go back and see, okay, how efficient was it? Remember, once we implement a process, at the end of the day, we need to go back and say, okay, let's go and review and see what is the success rate of how we've managed this process and the outputs that we got. Is it successful, or what do we think was lacking? And have conversations with the people that our stakeholders in terms of managing the process, and see how do we then change the process, and then how to also speak into making sure that we now create new objectives looking from what we have achieved and what was lacking. So that's something that you then have to look at in terms of your performance system. So okay, how do we make sure that we follow this process? What do we incorporate within, make sure that we manage that process, to make sure that at the end of the day, all you're looking for is an efficient performance management process. How can you make it most effective? How do you make sure that you include the different people that are involved in that process, and how relevant is it from conversations? Because remember, once you introduce a process, you're supposed to get feedback from the different role players within that process and see, okay, where are the gaps from how we manage in this process? How do we change it to make it better for the organization and the employees, because it affects both parties. From so the Human Resource Council, right, I mentioned that before an organization develop its effective management system, right, it needs to make sure that it has human resource practices that it has within its organization that can help support that process. To say, within us having a performance management system, what have we put in place to support that process, to make it effective, right? Because remember, you're supposed to have different practices to help achieve the objectives of your management system, right? So from there, it includes that one, we need to make sure that we have well-designed jobs and well-written job descriptions. So remember, when you're having people join your teams or you're joining an organization, the first point of reference is say, have I been given my job description? You've heard people say that, oh, it's not in my job description, right? When they don't want to do any work sometimes, or they're being asked to do things that are outside their framework. But to say from the onset, have we actually given our employees job descriptions? Do they understand in terms of our expectations as HR, as their managers, as their supervisors? Do they understand what work has to be done? Because remember, the frustration comes out when a person is doing work blindly and they don't understand in terms of what they have to do. They're only going on what their colleagues are saying. This is what's supposed to be done in terms of this function. But from now, an organization's perspective, have you actually sat down and given a person in black and white to say, this is what you're supposed to be doing on a daily, these are our expectations from you? So always make sure that in terms of human resource practices, you've given a person a well-written job description that's aligned to the job that you've hired them for. Because sometimes you might find that because we don't have that written in black and white, we're giving people different responsibilities that are not linked to the jobs that we've hired them for, right? The other practice that they also look at is, do we have effective supervision? So have we put in people in place? Because remember, when we have teams that we're managing, right? Whoever is leading that team or supervising that team has to be a person that understands that role and has either the technical and know-how of what that role entails and how it's supposed to be done, so that if I'm able now to supervise you and correct you, I'm coming from a point where I actually understand what has to be done in terms of that job. Because doesn't make sense if I'm getting a person who isn't a finance person to go and manage people in finance. Someone's coming from a marketing era, and then has to manage someone who's doing finance. They won't understand the figures if they don't have that background, right? So you need to mention that in terms of supervision, I'm putting a person that actually has the skills and understanding of what that role entails and is able to then guide that person where they're lacking or where they need that performance management. And then it also says that give your employees a comprehensive employee orientation and training. To say from the onset, always make sure that you orientate people into the role, right? Sit down and make sure they understand how the role is supposed to be executed. What are the different processes that are followed within those different roles that you've given your employees? Are you training your employees in terms of what should be done on that job? Because sometimes people join teams or they join organizations, and it's called what you're learning on the go. Really, you're not. There isn't time for you to actually go and sit with someone and you take them through the whole process. You're just getting in and you already said, you're already asked to say, go and do the job, right? So within organizations, we're supposed to then make sure that within us planning that orientation of a person into a role, do we set time aside where we're actually sitting and saying, okay, this is what the job is about, this is what you should be doing, give them the adequate training so that by the time we now give them the space to go and manage that process on their own or that role on their own, they actually have that background or that foundation to be able to understand what the role entails and what is supposed to be done, and even know the processes that need to be followed within those various roles that they have. And then also offer a positive and supportive work environment. So when you look at your different environments, do you think you're getting support in terms of the work that you need to do? Is it a positive environment? Is it a negative environment? From your experience, how would you rate the different environments that maybe you've been exposed to or you hear of, to say, maybe I've heard that in terms of Nedbank, this is how the work environment is in terms of supporting the employees, the managers there, supporting and guiding the people through the process, or it's something where you literally you're on your own and you have to figure out things when you look at your environments? Guys, from your side, how are your work environments? Are you guys there? Faye says she's got a great support structure in place. Okay, so from Faye's side, the supervisors, are they with the employees, taking them through the process and making sure that they give them the adequate support that they need in terms of improving on their performance? The other guys from your side?
From my side, uh, excuse me. Firstly, I'm working for Department of Commercial Services. I'm in the maintenance section there. So, but from my observation, the department is, even though policies are there, but the managers are not doing their job in making sure that the department achieve its objectives and goals. Sometimes I think also politics and they also play a big role in for managers not to do proper jobs, because we find that there are managers that have been appointed and they got the mandate when they got the appointments because they were appointed in strategic positions. Like for example, for a in my case, I have a acting maintenance manager who has no qualifications. He's been acting in that position for 3 years, and he's going on pension in 4 years' time. And when you look at it, there's not even a succession plan, because everything that he's doing is not involving any of his staff, in order maybe in case like, when the time for him to leave, then maybe someone else can remain there acting while maybe the HR is still trying to find a replacement. So it's very difficult.
So, Brightman, you mentioned that this maintenance manager has no experience. Is that correct? Or didn't come with the technical know-how?
No, it doesn't have experience.
He doesn't have the experience.
Yeah, for the position of a maintenance manager, he was just like a tradesman, like all of us. But even as a tradesman, but I will say he's semi-skilled because he's not qualified.
Okay. So have they tried to train him or assist in terms of him actually getting to understanding what the role entails and expectations, or they've just let him to discover on his own what needs to be done?
No, my point, some of the things that are happening in government departments, the senior managers are doing them deliberately because they know that that person, when they get caught of what they are doing, that person will be their scapegoat because one is not qualified. When you look at it now, with the things that are happening, it's just that I don't want to talk about our dirty laundry. But we observe and see that okay, people are making deals at the back. So the way things are happening, you can see that okay, the senior managers are putting this person here because they want to use him as their puppet. He will do whatever that they want because one, he knows that in that position he's not qualified, and for him it's easy even to avoid accountability because he will say no. They said I must act here, and I don't, and they knew very well that I'm not qualified. So I don't know whether I'm doing wrong or right. So what will you say in that case?
Okay. I think also maybe the question, just to say when we look at the, you mentioned in terms of the, okay, the wrong stuff that people are doing, right? To say on an ethical level, to say at the end of the day, I think people forget to say that whatever we're doing, yes, it benefits in the short run, right? To say yes, I might get wealthy and stuff, but we damaging systems and processes and organizations for the next generations, and which most likely our kids, right? Because it's just not about us. We have kids, we've got families, we've got friends that at some point would want to get into those organizations or have to benefit from those organizations. And once we damaging the whole structure and looking at self-benefit, right, it then affects how they're going to then survive in their different eras. And we're taking away now from them, benefiting from them and damaging the whole process. And it all just becomes a process of we just need to correct. We just need to correct. We're actually not finding ways of growing what we have, because we're just damaging for greed. But yeah, hopefully future generations will be different, and we'll be talking about different conversations if we're still alive, where it's corruption rate has reduced by 50%. But yeah, we all have dreams, right? It's a dream. Thanks a lot, Brightman, for sharing. And yeah, hopefully it gets better in terms of your support. I saw someone else also wrote that from their organizations, let me just see, that this Andile said he gets great support from his supervisors in his section, right? So depending on the roles that we all play, and as HR, we need to make sure that in terms of the employees that we have, are we actually assigning supervisors that will help them grow, right? This is where we're supposed to do those reviews and see in terms of the growth of or development of an employee. Has it been substantial? Are we seeing any growth? Are we having conversations? We also, that platform of honesty to say when you sit down with employees and find out in terms of their development, are they able to now give us an honest view in terms of the supervisors we're putting in place? Or is how's the relationship? Also, it boils down to relationships also, because sometimes, remember, supervisors, sometimes because of the human element, and where we always look for, can they not be biased, right, in terms of how they manage the process, to say that because of personal reasons, or whether it's a conflict with employees, right, it then affects in terms of the support that they give an employee, where they're looking for their downfall, right? Just like how Bipen was saying, to say that sometimes a supervisor might deliberately not want to support an employee because of a conflict maybe that has happened and hasn't been addressed. But it's important that if you're put in a position of power, that you realize that whatever you're doing is affecting, Because remember, when we join organizations or we're running departments, it's to say understanding what is the relevance of the job that I'm doing and the people that I'm leading, and how does it fit into the objectives of the organization? Because whatever's happening at the end of the day, it speaks into the achievement of objectives and profitability of your organizations. And once that is affected, it then affects now your compensation, how your organization is able to remunerate its employees and have a proper system and also have proper infrastructure. So whatever we're doing, we need to look at now, how does it affect the organization, and actually helping to build the employees and managing their performance in a way that it also becomes developmental for the employees. Thank you everybody for sharing. Welcome back, everybody. We're just going to continue with performance management. Did you all manage to have a break and recuperate? Where's everybody? Is the mute button been disabled?
Yes, Lala.
Okay. I was just checking if people are back or it's just names on on the system. So we're just going to proceed with where we had started. We're looking at performance management, understanding what is performance management, how to make sure that you manage people and make sure they arrive at meeting the objectives of the organization. And the same thing, breaking down the objectives of the organization into objectives for the employees and looking at their performance against that those objectives for the employees. So just to go ahead, guys, I want to give you guys an exercise, right? Just to get you into groups and get you to discuss and to hear how you guys would gel in terms of having group discussions, right? I've broken down in terms of some of the areas when we look at performance management that I want you guys to look at. I see the numbers are increasing now. Some of you guys are coming back just now. So I'm going to break you guys into 4 main groups. For the guys that are unable to get into a group, I've put them in the main platform, right? Where they can then discuss in the main platform, just in case the system doesn't pull all the names. So what I'd want, if you all can hear me, just first give me a thumbs up that you guys can clearly hear me before I explain in terms of what each group has to do. Okay, thank you. So for starters,
Lala, I can hear you, but can I not go into any groups? Like I said, I'm driving and getting on.
It's fine. So once it pulls you into a group, because I'm just going to do an automatic, right? You can always just be on mute and you tell the group members. Yes. So remember, guys, once you get into a group, right, remember to look into the room number, right? So group 1 is room 1, group 2 is room 2. So you have to check inside the room to just make sure which room am I in, so that you're able to know which question you're supposed to attempt, right? I'll give you guys 20 minutes to just try and find out more info in terms of the requirements of your question. Then you can come back, and then you can also remember to nominate a person within your groups. So you can either all share the feedback where each one is allocated in terms of what they're going to present in terms of feedback, or one person can elect themselves to present on behalf of the group. So depending on how you guys then decide in terms of how you're going to give us that feedback, but just make sure that somebody then does give us feedback for the group. And remember, please, it's not a rating exercise. It's just trying to also learn in terms of how do we compile information if you're put into a situation where we have to present, and also just trying to build in terms of our presentation skills to say, once you're doing that presentation, have a structure that you're going to follow in terms of what are the main points, how you're then going to explain those main points, and do a summary for the platform, right? So group 1, you're going to look at what are the various approaches of to performance management, right? Group 2, so you have to go and find out what are these approaches, what do they each entail, and explain to everybody what they are. Group 2, right, which is room 2, what does a performance management process entail? So go and find out what is a performance management process, right? So make sure you look at the process and not at a cycle or a model, but the process. What does it entail? The different elements within management process and what each means, so you can explain to everybody else in the class. Group 3, what are the elements that make up a performance appraisal procedure and the role of a performance appraisal, right? So within a performance appraisal procedure, what are the elements that make that up? And then also, what is the role of a performance appraisal? Because remember, from performance management being a process that includes different procedures and systems trying to effectively manage organizations, people management, people and reaching its objectives. Performance appraisal then comes in as a process that has to be done under performance management. So you have to then look at what is this procedure and then what is a performance appraisal, what is the role of having a performance appraisal. And then group 4 is explain what the employee management performance development system is and what is its objective, right? That's so group 4. So if you're going to go into room 4, you guys are going to look at the employee management performance and development system and its objective within the public sector. And then if you do not manage to get into any of those groups, right, which is room 1, room 2, room 4, up to room 4, in the main platform, if you remain on this platform, right, make sure that you're going to look at what is the importance of a performance appraisal. So you look at the various importances of a performance appraisal. Are we all on the same page? Before I put you guys into rooms, do you all understand in terms of, one, identifying which group you're in relation to the room, and then the question that you're supposed to address in each room? Are we all on the same page? What I can do, okay. And then maybe what I can do just to help you confirm is once you're in those rooms, I'll get in and just make sure that to confirm that you know which question you're supposed to be attempting, just in case you mix up the questions. So I'm going to put you guys into rooms. Yes.
Is there a possibility that on each group, when you put me in room 2, then I find the question there, you also make a caption of the question so that
I'm gonna, okay, let me put it on the chat. Hold on, let me just put it on the chat. I will. I'm gonna put, so what you can do in the meantime, you know what, get a screenshot, guys. You can get a screenshot of this, but I'll also put it on the chat. I'll put it on the chat in terms of the questions, but you can take a screenshot of the questions. For the guys that can take a screenshot, you can take a screenshot, and then I'm gonna put it on the chat. Just give me a minute. Hold on. Have some of the guys managed to get a screenshot?
Yes.
Okay, let me just. Why doesn't it allow me to paste? Okay, it's not allowing me to paste. Just give me a moment. I don't know why it's refusing to attach on here. Just hold on. Have we all managed to get a screenshot, guys? So that, because the chat is refusing for me to paste this. Have we all managed to get a screenshot?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna put you guys, I'm gonna start putting you guys into rooms. Just hold on. How many are we, by the way? Closed. These are rooms. So you are 22. So I'm going to put you guys in. How many? 6-6. Some of you are going to be 6-6. Some will be 5-5. Okay, assign. Just give me a moment whilst the system is 45, 6, automatically. So I'm going to now send you into the rooms, guys. So you've got 20 minutes within your groups to look for the information. As it done this. Done. Okay, gonna start putting you guys. In the interim, just open. Okay, it's opening. So you can be going through in terms of that section of performance management, so that by the time you're getting into your room, you have an idea in terms of where to find the content and also what you need to then add in terms of your research. It's pulling you guys slowly. Okay, most of you have gone. The guys that are in the main room, are you guys there? Hello, can you guys hear me? The guys that have remained in the main room. If you're in the main room, guys, please can you look at the question that says main platform? And then you guys can discuss within this platform. And are you guys fine? Let me try and do this. Hold on. Hi, Lumka. Let me try put you in a group. Maybe Lumka and Leslanganalo, I see you guys just joined now. Can you guys maybe do the main platform question? Because the other guys have already started from group 1 to group 4 in their rooms. So the guys that don't manage to get into any of the rooms or that join in now, you can do the main platform question where you have to find out what is the importance of a performance appraisal, to just try and find out what is the relevance of actually conducting performance appraisal. So if you guys can discuss within the main platform to find out that importance or the various importances of a performance appraisal.
Hi, Lala. I missed about 45 minutes of the session because I had to jump into a meeting as per my chat. So I thought within the group, I'll be able to catch up as the discussions will be ongoing so that one is able to add value to the discussions themselves.
Let me try to put you into a room, but if it
Thank you.
refuses to add you there, I'll keep you guys
Okay.
on the main platform.
All right.
Just give me guys a moment to add you.
Hi, Lala.
Alamka, it's pulling you guys into the rooms, so just maybe give it a moment.
Okay. Okay.
Lamka, did it bring you back? Because she's Are you guys back in the main room? Faye, Harry, you're in room 4, right?
I was in room 3.
Oh, have you guys left?
Yeah, we've left because we're done.
Oh, you guys are done. Okay.
Yeah.
You're in room 3, and Harry, you're from room 4. Just giving the other guys just 5 minutes for them to finish off.
Okay.
Where are the other guys from your groups? Are they still in there?
Everyone left out of our group.
Okay. Let me just mute from my side so that at least it doesn't disturb. Which rooms were you guys in?
Three.
The other guys are coming back now, and then we can resume in the main platform, guys.
And responsibilities.
All right, you guys are coming back into the main room. Let me just check if everybody has come back. Like I was just sorry for the mowing lawn. The mowing sound. The mowing the lawn this side. So there might be a noise just for a bit. I think everybody's back. Done.
Yeah, we're back.
Let me just check if all the rooms are closed off. I think so. Yeah, they're all closed. Okay. All the rooms are closed. Thanks everybody for coming back. Thanks for your time to contribute to your discussions. Did you guys manage to nominate who's going to present on behalf of the teams?
On number 2 is George.
Okay. As
Group
long as
2.
it's not okay. As long as I nominated somebody. Who wants to start in terms of feedback? Is it group 2? Do you want to start group 1?
Group 2 can start if group 1 is not yet ready.
Okay.
All right. Group 2 as a group, we have discussed. Our question was saying, what does a performance management process entail? We looked on it entails planning, assessment, development, and also the recognitions. We have discussed that on the planning process, they check on our IQMS, which is Integrated Quality Management System, which they will measure on how to go to the appraiser. So number 1, they will look at our sectional meetings, whether we met as a section, did we monitor what we're supposed to be monitored, because it's between us and the organization. We usually use, I took an example of a test for students, where we'll set a test which has got a memorandum with the analysis grid. And this question paper will have a pre-moderation where the one who's setting the question paper will check first. It goes to the senior, and then it goes to the HOD before it go to the external, which is the central office. And after they have checked, they will give us the post-moderation. After they wrote how do we check this one? There will be We check how many students enrolled, how many students wrote, how many students passed, and how many failed, so that we can we manage to get the average pass rate. On the development, on that IQMS, there is a portion which they say, which do you think we can provide so that we manage to get better results? And then we'll list everything that we think if they provide this, I'm going to able to make my class conducive and make a better class management, which the students are going to manage to improve the results. And on the recognitions, there is a portion where I'm going to score myself that I managed to get this. And the portion where the organization is going to score, after they scored and they check also my scoring, it's where they give us an appraisal based on the yearly assessment that we're doing. From the early of the year, it was monitored, and at the beginning of the year, there is a evaluation where they check whether my scores and their scores are corresponding, and then it's where they are going to give us the rewards or the appraisal. I will pause there.
Thank you so much, room 2. Just hold on, guys. So just take note, guys, usually when they ask you for some of these processes and cycles or models, to just see which one are they asking for. So if you see from question 2, group 2, right? You guys were explaining the performance management process model, right? The one that says plan, assess, recognition, and develop, right?
Yes.
The one that refers to question 2 is performance management process, which is this one. So there's a model and then there's a process. You're explaining the model. If see, the question didn't say model. So just take note of that. Surely in exams, to say, sometimes they might say to you performance management cycle, performance management process, performance management process model. Which one do they actually mean, so that you see the difference, because they all are different models that each entails. Do you see the difference? Room 2.
No, can see on page 35.
Yes, they're two different. Yeah, this one is performance management process. The one you guys looked at was the performance management process model.
All right.
Okay. So from the management process, just because they're all aligned and speak to getting the same objective at the end of the day, but it's to understand how it then starts, right? To say from the process, it looks at getting your objectives, which is your starting point, to say what are the strategic objectives of the organization. This is what is this? The end point of what we want to achieve as an organization, right? And then you look at your organizational structure to say, okay, in terms of the employees that we have and such that we have, how are we going to make sure that we align into feeding into those objectives, depending on our departments, and what each is working on, or what is each represents, right? From that, you look now at job profiling and designing, right? To say for every job that you have within your organization, speaking into, right, the structures that you have and the objectives of the organization, make sure that now the responsibilities are now aligned to what the objectives are that you want to achieve, and also try and look at the characteristics and personality and the behavior of the person that you want to take on that role. Remember, when you're doing profiling, make sure that you align responsibilities and the person. So remember that job specification, job description, all look into that to come up with one, right? To say at the end of the day, this is now the person that we're looking for that's going to fit into this role doing these specific responsibilities. Then you're looking at staff information now. Okay, how do I have what people do I have? How do I have enough people to then fit into these different roles? And now, what are the job requirements? What does the job need that person to be doing for you to be able to speak into the objectives. After you've now analyzed what the job entails, what is supposed to be done by on a daily by a person, and how it fits into the objectives, this is now you sit down and say, okay, now let me look at individual performance planning for now every person, right? Because remember, that job is then aligned to a person and responsible for that responsibility that that falls under that job. Once you've done that, sorry guys, I don't know, I forgot to put on my camera. Once you've done the individual performance planning, then you now look at performance monitoring to say, okay, we've sat down and agreed in terms of what has to be done, right, by the person. Now let's start monitoring your performance. We're sitting down and saying, in terms of criteria, let's put down what we're going to use when you're going to measure a person's performance, put in the different standards that you have within your department. Say, this is how we're going to measure, right, in terms of the outputs that we're looking for per person. Then you do your performance reviews now to say, okay, we've said in terms of what a person's supposed to achieve. Now let's sit down and see if they manage to achieve, so that we try and see if there's a gap in terms of what a person's initial expected performance was, and through the different monitoring what was happening. And now at the end of that period, remember, in terms of your the performance monitoring and review, you're supposed to give timelines. Say, okay, what is the timeline that we're going to go and say, okay, let's review and see whether is it within a 12-month period, is it under a 6-month period. I remember, I think Lehlongono was talking about how this is broken down. Is it 6 to 9 months? Something else then happens within the organization where they're checking in terms of what the supervisor has done in terms of supporting the employee and meeting the performance requirements of the organization and the employees, right? So once you've done that review and have set in terms of this is what a person has achieved, this is where now, as an HR person, you're able then to determine in terms of, okay, how do we then reward the employee, right? How do we set reward systems for the employees? Because remember, some of our organizations then only reward after looking at our performance. So you then look at, from an HR side, what are the consequences of doing this process and what is the end result from rewards from the people that have, there's been a gap in terms of what you set out for them to achieve in terms of performance and what they actually manage to achieve. It's below, if it's below the set targets that you put, then you look at how do we then put in training and development for those employees? Where were they lacking? What is the support that they need, that we need to make sure that we implement within our organizations or within those different roles. We also look at succession planning, right? To say that from the different roles and the progression of people, right? Remember, with succession planning, where you try and narrow down in terms of those critical roles in an organization, that you need to make sure that you're already training up people to come and then take over those roles, whether a person is leaving the organization or a person is moving to a new role, or a person might leave on different, depending on the terms of them exiting the organization. But now also look at succession planning to say that for the person's performance and seeing how they're operating, if it's at the levels that you want, then you can look at, can you then place them into that role that you want to start planning for, that will need someone to come and succeed or be the next successor for that that role that is very critical to the organization. So you're then supposed to look at your succession planning, looking at a person's performance and how to then put them into those different roles. And then also look at your counseling and discipline to say that for the ones that are maybe lacking in terms of performance, where they're not achieving as expected, because remember, there's some that are maybe just falling short by a small margin, where you can say, okay, let me just train and develop these people. And then those ones that you see that they're sitting at a very low review status, and they now need to go through performance counseling, where now it's, a one-on-one kind of like keeping tabs, what like trying to micromanage a person and make sure that they meet the performance expectations of the organization, and also look at how do you make sure that you instill discipline within that process so that people can try and adhere to the performance agreement expectations with the employees. I hope that gives an indication in terms of what the process entails. Thank you so much, Room 2, for your contribution. The other guys? I think it's room. Which room wants to go next?
Room 4 want to go. Is it fine, Dali?
Yes, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Room 4, we are dealing with the explanation of employee performance management and development systems and its objectives. When we're explaining EPMDS, we said it is a strategy or a tool to assist organization in achieving desired performance goals through execution of a clearly defined performance measurement system. It is normally done to manage the performance of employees from the beginning of each financial year, and the employees are assessed following the performance agreement they've signed and the work plan they've developed. When we're looking at the objectives of performance management and development system, we say it's one is to identify gaps in performance of employees against key performance areas as they are found in the performance agreement with an aim of improving performance. Secondly, we said is to identify training needs so that development plans can be initiated to address the skills gap within employees' performance. Thirdly, we said is to enable employees to know about their roles and responsibilities as they are found in their job description. And fourthly, we said is to identify employees who qualify for rewards or pay progression for the adjustment of the salary structure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, guys. Are there any questions from the platform in terms of what the guys shared? Any additions? Any comments, guys? Maybe just to pose a question from the guys that maybe currently working in public sector. Has this been implemented within your different spheres? Is this actually active there, or anyone from the public sector?
Lala, if I can come again.
Yes.
I'm Sizwe, I'm from KZN. I'm working for the Department of Education. I'm in the public sector. Yeah, with us, we have tried to reinforce and accelerate the implementation of the performance management. We're having designated a unit within HR, we call it Human Resource Management, and we're having a division dealing with performance management and evaluation that deals with processes of evaluating performance of school-based educators, that is called QMS, Quality Management Systems, as well as the office-based educators. The performance management systems there is called educators professional management systems that are office-based. And there are employees within us in the Department of Education that are employed according to the Public Service Act, though their system is called the Performance Management and Development Systems without an E. Then at the beginning of each and every financial year, the employees are supposed to sign performance agreement and develop work plan, both at school level as well as at office level. Then there is a performance management plan that must be followed by supervisors to deal with the development, because they must informally manage and evaluate performance. Then we're having the half-yearly reviews. Then we're having the annual reviews. Then scores are submitted to performance management to be processed by the human resource services that deal with salary adjustment, so that people can qualify for their 1.5 salary progression. And also when people apply for funding to study like this course, the skills development facilitator will not fund you if what you want to study was not mentioned one in your personal development plan or skills development plan. Thank you very much. And then I'm saying it is in the way followed, although it has been not followed to the teeth. Previously, people were doing it for malicious compliance, but we're trying to improve and accelerate the implementation of the system.
Okay. Thank you so much, Caesar. Thank you for sharing. The other groups. I think group 3 and group 1.
Invitation. We're not sure if maybe because after listening to the rest of the group leaders, I'm not sure if maybe we answered correctly. But let me go through.
Go ahead.
Through to. Yeah. So our group is discussing what elements make up a performance appraisal procedure and the role of performance appraisal. So, in our understanding, as a manager or a business owner, the people you manage are critical to the success of the business or the department you run. But to achieve that success, everyone needs to be heading in the right direction, which is the same direction you want, or you want the business or the department to go to. Performance management is a means to help us get there. While there are many elements that go into performance management, there are 5 key areas that are fundamental to its success. It's planning and goal setting, and management and employee involvement, and is development and improvement, and then it's monitoring and feedback. So with regards to planning and goal setting, when you're planning, the way this planning is approached, it can be a job description or a role that the employee has to play. And it's also important that you must set expectation so that it can also help the employee to know what is expected of him or her. Then coming back to management and employee involvement, if you are making changes in your business or your department without involving everyone, it is possible that you may not get a buy-in from the rest of the team that you're working with. And if that happens, so you will face a problem where your team is not going in the same direction. And remember now, your staff won't be happy with your decision that you are taking. And when the staff is not happy, and that's how your client will also feel when they have to be attended by your staff. So let me leave it there for now for Faye to come in. For Faye, because she also said she will have some inputs after I've addressed the class.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, so I'm just continuing with the role of having a performance appraisal. So what we said is it's obviously to provide feedback to the person with regards to his or her performance. Secondly, it's also to serve as a basis to change behavior. So whatever's being picked up, maybe it's bad working habits or whatever, it'll be discussed and they can move forward from there. Thirdly, it's also to provide information and data to managers. So there's something in black and white that they can go back to for if they've got to have future discussions.
Right, is that all, Faye?
That's it.
All right, thanks guys for your contribution.
All right.
Just to maybe add, right, say in terms of the procedure, I know you guys don't unable to see it from your side. Let me just put it on for you to say for the performance appraisal procedure, right? These are the different steps that are followed in terms of coming up with whatever in terms of following that procedure, where you're supposed to, in terms of step one, identify the criteria, because remember it's very important to say what is the criteria you're going to use in terms of actually measuring performance. You're supposed to sit down and agree. Remember, whatever you're discussing with an employee, as a person in HR or a person who's managing that process, depending on how the responsibility is given in different organizations, is to say that you have to make sure that everybody's on the same page and it's been signed off to say this is what criteria we're going to measure against in terms of your performance criteria, so that we're all on the same page. Remember, because communicating in terms of expectations to the employee is then very important in terms of the employee then understanding what are the objectives that they need to meet, what are the responsibilities on a day-to-day that they're supposed to make sure that they achieve to meet the requirements of the organization. Once you've identified that performance criteria and communicated to the employees and everybody has signed up, right? That's when you're supposed to then measure that performance to say, okay, everybody agrees, this is the criteria we have set, we're going to base it on. Let's now measure the performance of that person, right? Within that cycle, you're supposed to make sure that you're measuring the person's performance according to the criteria that you've put in your processes, right? And then from there, you're supposed to now do a comparison at the end of the day to say, okay, we have agreed in terms of every teacher to say this is the passage that we're expecting within your different areas, whether it's maths, it's English, if it's business studies, right? Now let's look at the performance in terms of the output that you're supposed to get at the end of the day, right? We compare now your performance from what you got and the desired criteria that we use to see now, did you actually meet what you're supposed to meet? And then you're able to see what the gap in is. And then from there, like what the guys were saying, so now you can now decide in terms of other employees meeting the objectives, where do you then come in terms of motivating your employees? Because remember, once you do that performance appraisal procedure, you're also able to sit with the employees, right, and discuss, and in that also motivate them and have discussions with them to say, okay, in terms of what they're doing, if they're doing a good job, how they can improve, or where you're saying, oh, you've aced this. Because remember, people get then motivated from that during those discussions where you are reiterating in terms of your recognition of the work that they're doing or their contributions. It's very important then to look back and say, okay, from this performance appraisal, how do I then make sure that it benefits the organization and the employee from this? And then also, how do I then determine in terms of how I would then adjust in terms of compensation, looking at the overall outcome of the whole procedure and a person's performance, if it's sitting at the level that you've set in terms of your criteria, or if it's far from the criteria, then you can then decide in terms of the different remedies, whether it needs coaching, if it needs disciplinary, what does it need? And then you can then follow the different processes that you put in place in terms of managing performance, depending on what level they're sitting on and what you'd have agreed in your policies when you're managing performance of employees. Thank you guys so much. I think we've got one more group. Group one, I think it was a group one. Or room one. Are you guys still there? Room one. What happened to room one? Did they disappear? Who was in room one? Room one had nobody, but there were people there. Okay, let me just see what room one was supposed to do. So room one was, what are the various approaches to performance management, right? To see where do we, how performance management is used. And in terms of approaches, you'll see that it's broken down into various areas where it's sometimes used as a individual assessment tool, right? Let me just read from my side. Not just me, from everybody, right? So performance management is sometimes used as an individual assessment tool where we're looking at using it to make sure that we look at a person and say, how do we then manage their performance? How do we use this process to make sure that we analyze the performance of a person? Because remember, once a person gets into the system or gets into an organization, we're supposed to then monitor their performance on an individual basis. So you then use that performance management to make sure that you're assessing a person on an individual basis. Because remember, we assess either individually, we assess on a group level, on an organizational level. Because performance is firstly on the employee basis, and then we look at on an organizational basis. So it's then to look at the first point to say we're using it to assess a person's performance on a one-to-one basis, right? From there, you now look at how do you then use it as a developmental tool, where from you doing that performance management process and putting in the different processes that you're going to follow in terms of assessing a person's performance, you're then able to detect in terms of the gaps where they're lacking. Remember, from your criteria, you've set and said, this is what a person's supposed to achieve, and this is how we're going to measure their performance. Once you see the areas where they're lacking, where they need either training or where they need some coaching, you're then able to use that different feedback that you're going to get from managing or from conducting that performance management process to be able now to see, okay, how do I develop my employees? How do I make sure that I'm also finding the gap and seeing how to narrow that gap or that lack that I'm seeing in my employees so that they also grow? Because remember, the performance management process is to make sure that whatever the organization wants to achieve trickles down to the employees, and from the employee side, they're supposed to make sure that their performance is feeding into the objectives of the organization. So from there, you're able to use it to grow your employees and make sure that they meet now the expected levels that you want them to achieve at the end of the day. And how then do you make sure that you speak to those missing links in terms of their performance in the areas of development. So you might then look at it as a developmental tool for your organization, and then also look at performance management on an organizational level. Because remember, you're then supposed to look at the collective performance of the organization to say from the individual basis where everybody plays a part, right? Where we say in terms of alignment, understanding in what each person is supposed to contribute to the whole expectation of the organization. What is now the overall performance of the organization? How do you make sure that within our implementation and monitoring our organizations, from planning to controlling all the different processes and the levels that we're responsible for, then we're able to see in terms of how we've set out from a planning perspective, does it actually trickle down in terms of employees speaking to what we want to achieve as an organization, how we then rating the performance of the organization, and at the end of the day, how we're rating it using what feedback we're getting from the external, what we've put in place within an organization, where we can sit down and say from the performance that we're looking at as an organization, whether on a collective level, if it's maybe a school, to say at the end of the day, let's now look at the performance to say maybe we might use enrollments, right? To say for the years that then come, for maybe next year, let's look at if you're going to get return students, if you're going to get increased enrollments or people applying to come and join our high school or primary school, depending on what we would have said in terms of our performance criteria for the organization as a whole. Also, it helps in terms of now creating direction for the organization, where we're saying in terms of how or where we want to go, this is the direction that we're going to follow as an organization. And this is now when we're looking at now the strategy we're going to use for the organization, depending on the performance that would have set for organization, whatever we use to measure it, and then how do we then make sure that everybody plays a part in terms of meeting the overall objective of the organization. So from group one, if group one is there, if they want to add anything, where's group one? group 1 played hide and seek with us. Just to also add, guys, to say from your performance management side, you've done performance management, where it includes all the different processes and procedures that you're going to do in terms of managing the whole process. You then with performance appraisals, right, to say what is actually the importance of performance appraisal when you look at organizations. Because remember, when you're having conversations with employees and also trying to make them understand why we're doing performance appraisals, because remember, from maybe experience or maybe what you hear when you're discussing with other people that are also in the working arena, to say when their perception towards the performance appraisal maybe might be negative, but once a person understands what is the importance of actually having that process done within an organization, then it's maybe might change in terms of perception, and people can understand the relevance of having this done within organizations. So here it talks about giving personal attention to employees, because remember, when we're having these performance appraisal meetings and we're sitting down with employees, we're now trying to narrow down and have conversations, but we can speak in terms of where the organization, where the employee maybe might need support, where they feel maybe there's an organization is lacking in terms of supporting the employee. How can you try and narrow down, right, in terms of that gap that we're seeing in terms of what the employee is supposed to achieve, or sometimes just to reiterate in terms of where the employee has managed to excel. Because remember, it's not always that it's going to be negative feedback when it comes to an appraisal. Some people are doing as expected and beyond that. So it's also to go and give that recognition within that conversation, and it helps the person, right, to say, okay, I'm getting that motivation, and that drives them in terms of wanting to perform further on what their responsibilities are and meeting the goals of the organization. And also within those conversations, remember, that's when you can also sit down and say, in terms of what an employee has been given from their responsibilities, right, to say, okay, let's discuss from how maybe the 6 months has transpired and what you've been exposed to say, from what you've given me in terms of responsibilities, does it actually speak to the work that I've been doing, or do we need to maybe come and change my responsibilities, looking at my job description? So that also helps on that platform. And also
ke bone e tsene e teng ke tla e lebella sentle ke check and then ke tla ke respond.
Sorry, let me mute, guys. Sorry, right. It also mentions accountability and sometimes communication of goals, right? Where as you're sitting down, it also helps to speak to the employee to say that they know in terms of your expectations and where they need what they're accountable for. Because sometimes with the progression of time and change of responsibilities and being delegated different things, sometimes people then lose in terms of what they're accountable for. So once you sit down with an employee, you're able then to say, in terms of accountability, is the employee being accountable for the work that they've been given, or maybe there's a miscommunication in terms of what they're supposed to be doing. You can then correct it within those conversations, and also look at speaking about the goals, right? To say, what is a person supposed to do? What do you want them to achieve at the end of the day? Because sometimes people blindly start certain roles and haven't actually had that conversation where they're told, this is what we expect you to achieve at the end of the day. And because that hasn't happened, once you sit down and now you're saying, okay, let's go through your appraisal and let's talk about the goals that have been set for you, that's when you're able to have a clear picture to say, does this person actually understand what the organization expects from them, and where maybe communication wasn't given in terms of what the person's supposed to be doing. And then you're able to narrow down now that discrepancy, so that at the end of the day, should you be moving forward, that person then understands in terms of what you want them to achieve at the end of the day. And then also just in terms of career path, because remember, when we have discussions with employees in relation to performance, right? Sometimes you can then sit down and see at the progression to say, okay, if they've managed to achieve expectations, you can then try and start channeling to say, okay, from your career plan, this is what maybe you can move on to, because you've managed to excel in the current position that you're in. Or maybe if a person once you sit down and you have that conversation, and remember, it has to be an honest conversation where if a person is unhappy in terms of the job or is uncomfortable with performing a job, because remember, sometimes people might end up in roles because this is where the vacancy was, this is where the opportunity was, but in terms of them actually settling into the job and being able to do the job, they realize maybe this is not where I'm supposed to be. Then you can have conversations, say, okay, looking at maybe the different areas that we have within organizations, this is maybe where you can take your career from the point that you are, looking at the different angles that you might look at the roles you have in the organization and maybe a person's interests. Because remember, also the interests might also help you in terms of narrowing down their career path. Are we still together, guys?
Sure.
Yes, we are.
All right.
Yeah.
How from
Yes.
Sure. Yes.
okay. Thank you, Danki Kyaleboka Nyabonga. From your organizations, guys, if you can maybe just look in terms of underperformance, right? How do you guys deal with underperformance in your organizations? Because I know it's we all aim for 100% performance achievement from our employees, but because the world is how the world is and life happens the way it's supposed to, we might find that some employees that might lack in terms of expectations. How do organizations deal with that? You guys there? How do you deal with
Yes.
underperformance? Yes.
Yes, Lord. I think with us, we after the supervisors have submitted the reports to the performance evaluation moderation committee, they must account how they've dealt with underperformance, which they must devise strategies, one, to cancel or to train the employees. But we're also having a circular guiding underperformance in schools, that is consequence management for underperformance. We stipulate what processes need to be followed, like training for district occasions, then redeployment of an employee or change of a position or shifting of an employee from an office to another responsibility suitable for the skills and qualification of that employee. Thank you very much.
Sorry, guys, was that Brightman? I couldn't see who was speaking.
It was Sizwe.
Sizwe. Okay, sorry, Sizwe. Oh, thank you so much, Sizwe. The other guys, how do you guys manage underperformance? So I know every organization manages follows different policies when it comes to dealing with underperformance. Some might carry lost leaders for the sake of carrying them for certain reasons, but how do you manage underperformance? Because I know Cesar mentioned that they also then would put in procedures in terms of, do we train the employees? How do we discipline the employees in terms of performance expectations? But from your guys' side, how have you been exposed to managing underperformance? Or what process was followed from your performance appraisal once an employee had a low rating? Well, are you guys in the class or you're now watching the soccer? Let me see what time it is, because some of you are looking at their screens for the football, trying to keep tabs on the World Cup. If you've put your money on any of the teams. Guys, how do you deal with underperformance? Okay, we take it that from your organizations, everything is 100% and employees performance expectations. But when you look at, can you guys see that? Can you see my screen? First, you mind just muting yourself?
Yes.
Okay, hold on. Let me just mute from my side. There's someone that's got a background sound. Just hold on. Okay, guys, I was just trying to mute the person to say that when you have underperformance, right? Because remember, you're going to progress in your different roles, right? To say at some point you might have to deal with an underperformer, right? Where you're managing someone within your teams that is underperformed and trying to find out, okay, how do I make sure that I manage that process, right? To say once you've looked at your performance expectations and explain to the to your employees, you're then supposed to then look at how do you then identify what are the reasons, right? That person had a low performance according to your expectations, right? You're supposed to sit down, because remember when you look at you're making decisions in ground evidence, where it says make sure that before you make a decision on a person, right, you've done all process and understood in terms of their behavior, in terms of them not meeting expectations, what was the root cause of them achieving that certain level that wasn't what you're expecting as an organization, right? To say now look at the various areas that might be an issue. So you're looking at your skills, a person's ability or competence to actually do the certain role. Because remember, sometimes people are sitting in responsibilities. Because remember, I think who was it earlier on who mentioned in terms of the correctional services side, to say that someone was sitting in a role of maintenance and actually didn't have the know-how to do that job, right? So when you're looking at ability of that person, are they able to perform that job that you've put them in, right? Or and then also maybe lack of motivation, to say within your organizations, is there enough motivation to drive your employees to perform their duties, or what motivates an employee? Because remember, as HR, you're supposed to understand how people are motivated. Some are motivated internally, some need external motivation. So understanding from now that individual perspective, what drives that person, so that you're able to see maybe are they lacking motivation within the work that they're doing or the departments that they're working, right? And also maybe is it rules that they're breaking within the organization, where maybe sometimes people might cut corners in terms of processes, and that then affects their performance because they're trying to get their job done, or they're trying to rush for knock-off time. So they may be breaking the rules and not doing their work properly, which is then affecting their performance. And also maybe when you're sitting and having a one-to-one with people and have those relationships within organizations. Remember, when we look at relationship management, we're saying that within our departments, all the people that we're responsible for, right? We need to make sure that we are able to have conversations where people can come and be open up with about the issues that they're facing, so that we're able to know if that is going to affect their performance. Because remember, once the person has got issues that are affecting them emotionally or mentally, right, that then affects their productivity. So it's something that you should then try and identify and see what is the root cause of a person not performing as per you expected. From there, depending now with the reason, right, that person has underperformed, you're able now to say, let's now pick out a corrective measure for that person in relation to the reason why they were underperforming. Because remember, whatever remedy you're going to put in place has to be aligned to what was the cause for it, so that at least you're giving a person the right remedy, right? So from like what Caesar was saying, to say from their side, sometimes they might look at training a person, or sometimes if a person is not aligned in terms of the job, or maybe the teams, because sometimes remember you might be working in the Gauteng division, but because of the team and the dynamics there, right, you might not be aligned to them and in sync with that team, and it might be better for you to actually move that person to a different region, where they might go to Mpumalanga or Eastern Cape. So depending on what is actually the problem that a person is facing, then you're able to say, okay, is maybe a transfer something that they can look at. So here you see that there's the various reasons or various ways that you can actually try and remedy when a person is underperforming, that you can then look at and make sure that you're giving a corrective action to the different problems that a person is facing when it comes to their performance. So you can either demote them or change their work depending on what they have done, or maybe counsel an employee, take them through in terms of how you can help them grow and develop in their role. Or sometimes it might end up at a situation where you have to terminate employment. Then with you terminating employment, is make sure that you've done the whole process and actually said, okay, in terms of me counseling a person and their performance, is it solely because the employee was not interested in the job and it actually is not willing to actually step up when it comes to the job, and you see that in terms of this agreement, it's not going to work or be productive or beneficial for the organization or the employee. Just it's not a good relationship that you're having with the employee. So sometimes you might then have to terminate, but make sure with you terminating an employee, you followed the right procedure in terms of communicating, giving them help. If maybe there is lack of communication within the parties, if you called in other third parties come and help you mediate the process or try and speak to the employee. If that's all has failed, you've done all processes to help the employee, then maybe you can then decide, okay, let me terminate the agreement and you guys part ways, because there isn't anything that's going to come out of that relationship. So it's you now as a person that's responsible for that process, either being as an HR, as a manager, or as a head, to then decide to say from how a person is performing and the reasons for them underperforming, what is the best way that I can make sure that I correct where they're lacking and fix it, and make sure that going forward they can then maybe get better or improve in their performance. Have you guys ever terminated contracts because of performance? What process did you guys follow? If anyone has, or if you've been, we've been in a process where we terminated employees because of performance. What process did you guys follow? Haven't you guys, we won't say fired anyone. Haven't you terminated any contracts because of performance?
Yeah,
Sorry, you said?
they have.
You have, what is the process that you guys followed, Faye?
Well, look, I'm not in HR, so I don't know exactly, but I do know that they do give you training. They first give you a chance to upskill yourself. So they send you for all the necessary training if they feel that you're lacking in a certain area. And then every month, so they give you 3 months to see if, obviously you're picking up on performance, if things are improving, but they will have a monthly discussion with you. So they literally sit with you. You're given guidance and mentorship. So there's someone, walking the path with you for about 3 months. But if they see that there's no improvement from you, or nothing is happening from your side, obviously they've got to call you in, and then, they have the difficult discussion. But I mean, they do give you ample chance to prove yourself and, to show that you are putting in the effort and there's something from your side.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Faye. The other guys? The other guys? So, okay. So you guys, maybe the other guys haven't been exposed to underperformance, but when you're looking now at your personal organizations, performance appraisal processes, what do you think maybe should be changed that can make the process better from your experience? Because I know you've gone through whether current or even maybe your previous organizations or organizations that you've read about, to say what do you think in terms of their performance appraisal should be changed or improved to make the process smoother and easier for the parties involved? Come on, guys. Maybe if it said, if you answer these questions, you're getting marks towards your POE, you guys would have been speaking. It reduces, no, if it was, if I'd said that if people answer these questions, we remove pages from your POE in terms of administration. Then people would have been answering the questions. Come on, guys. What do you think from your experience with your performance appraisal processes can be changed to how or should be improved? Anyone?
Yes, Lala.
Yes, please go ahead.
Um, uh, Even though I've never been exposed to that level, but I will just comment on what I think it should be done.
Okay.
Like in a case where you've come across a junior or a subordinate that is not doing well, firstly you must try and see what is the problem, because some people are affected by personal problems that you as a manager you might not be aware of. Maybe a person is going through divorce. I've never been in that situation, but understanding from what people go through, that also can cause a person not to do well in the workplace. So sometimes you will find that the person is short-tempered, or because they say that process is very straining. So it is very important before maybe you apply what the procedures say, just to have an understanding of the problem the person is facing, because some people cannot maybe or for some reasons they, they may not be comfortable to share with you as a manager what is going through. But maybe if you as a manager you go down to them and try and be a person, put aside being a manager, just be a human being firstly, show some humanity. I think that can help a lot in solving those problems, because once you identify the problem, then you will find better ways to assist that particular employee.
Okay, thanks a lot, Brightman. I like that part where you said in terms of showing your human side when it comes to this process, because if you've seen in some organizations almost, in terms of that perception when it comes to conducting appraisals, where it's seen so much negative perception towards that process, where maybe it's just boils down to making the process a developmental process, because sometimes managers use that process to try and put you down in terms of your performance, but they're not looking at it in terms of how do I develop that person, how do I speak and have a one-on-one conversation where a person can be comfortable enough. Because remember, with this process, it's about setting the atmosphere where a person is comfortable, they're able to say in terms of their concerns. And you as a manager can also speak in a way that develops a person where you're not only saying, oh, you're lacking this, but instead of saying you're lacking this, to say, why don't you rather try ABC, so that they see in terms of where they need to make sure they go and improve, instead of you just putting it in a negative way. So we also have to, as people that then manage those processes, to say, maybe we should change the way we approach it and the attitude that we have in terms of how we're going to speak to the people, and also making sure that have we set up the right atmosphere for the conversation, and emphasize that this is for developmental purposes for the employee and also for the organization, so people actually understand the reason why this is important and why it has to be done. Thank you so much, Brightman. Any other guys before we go for lunch?
Just to add there, Lala,
Yes.
I think another problem that we as employees we face in our workplace, we will find that maybe you really have a problem and you feel like you can talk to this manager so that he can understand what you are going through. But because of maybe that, hey, once you share that personal problem with that manager, maybe the whole office or the whole command will know that hey, as you can see, so and so is going through this, and so sometimes confidentiality is very important. So
Very
I
true.
think also managers need to be trained on how to handle personal problems of employees.
Yeah, that's very true, right? In terms of understanding that, when it comes to personal information, where I know for HR officials, it's one of those mandatory things to say that when it comes to confidentiality, it's something that you can't share, even if a person tells you what they're going through in a separate conversation. You're not allowed to then divulge what that person is going through. So in terms of other people that might then be involved in that process, is to understand that how does that lack of trust then affect the relationship going forward, right? In trying to also teach the people that we're given that responsibility to understand the repercussions of openly saying things that are personal to other people that are not the owner of that information, what it affects in terms of the employee, and also the teams that employee impacts, and also as in general, people will then have no trust in no. It also remove that openness that you have set in the organization, where people can come and freely share the issues. So already killing a culture where employees can come and share the issues that they're facing, and now you're taking away from them now that platform of getting that assistance or someone to help them deal with the issues that they're having. So it's very important that we try and learn how to maintain that confidentiality when it comes to personal information and people's issues that they're facing, so that at least we're maintaining that trust within relationships, and we're also building relationships in the organizations. Thank you so much, Brightman. Guys, it is 12:09. We've come to the end of performance management with the different areas that it affects, and what should be looked out from when you're looking at performance management, from the appraisals to the different approaches to what the role and importance of performance appraisals is, and what are the repercussions, or what are the different remedies that you can use in your organizations when it comes to underperformance. We will stop there for now. It's 12:10. We'll go for lunch. And then, Brightman, is that a question?
Oh yes. Just before we go for lunch, yesterday one of our colleagues raised the issue of the project management workshop and submission, of which you promised that Mr. Vutali will come in today and tell us when is that going to take place and how we're going to do the submission. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure if maybe it happened that you've already spoke about it, but maybe I wasn't in the class yet.
No, I'm just waiting for Vutali to let us know when he is available, because I said when we started, say, Vutali, when you're able to join, just let us know. So once he can speak on this platform, he can maybe just then share with the information with everybody in terms of those support sessions. So hopefully after lunch, Vutali, you will be able to give us feedback when it comes to the support sessions on the schedules for the students. Lehlong Onolo?
Um, uh, Also, there was a question around if you've done a qualification. So I think the lady spoke about an HR qualification as to what will happen. And you referred her to write to Vutali. Did you have a conversation with Vutali on that? But also, does Vutali respond to emails? He seems to be nowhere to be found. I'm not sure if it's just my experience.
Vutali, Vutali would have to answer on his own behalf in terms of the feedback. If the person also sent the email, because ideally he would have responded. If he hasn't, maybe he can then give response to the person. Vutali, if you can, from your side, just let us know when you're available within the session to just address the students in terms of the questions, or if you can please respond, if you're listening, and respond to the emails that have been sent to you. Apologies for that, guys, if you haven't got any response, but there should be a reason why you haven't got a response. So we'll just continue with the few areas that we want to cover today. Just give me a moment. So the next section, if you've managed to see, looks at training and development practices that should be followed within human resources and within our organizations, to say what should we make sure we take note of if we're going to incorporate training and development for our employees or our teams that we're managing. So with when you're looking at this section, right, to say within the practices, right, it's the first the reason why we're trying to do training and development is to make sure that we realize the progression in terms of an employee's growth, right? To say from where they started, the knowledge that they have, the experience that they have, is there any progression that's happening with the training that we're providing? Because whatever training you're going to offer a person, there has to be an increase in terms of where they're going and what they have achieved in terms of knowledge. So whatever training you're going to provide for people, just make sure and you analyze to see, okay, from where the person was before to where they are after the training, is there been any progression from that, right? And then from an HR perspective, to say in terms of training and development, is to say that make sure that during your that induction process, once a person has started with your organization and gone through the induction, right? You've given them their career objectives so that they're able to decide in terms of the training that they might need from what training they've gotten, or looking at the objectives of their career that you've set with the employees that are with your organization. So just make sure that you also have career objectives with your employees to allow for your training and development practices. Because remember, your training will come in place after you've said to a person, this is your career projections, this is where you want to be, this is what training you might then need. So make sure that you've set out the objectives that a person has to want to achieve in terms of their career, right? And then also look at identify an employee's strengths and weaknesses, right? That's the only that's the only way you can then be able to diagnose in terms of the training that's needed. To say, before I can say to a person, okay, you're going for this type of training, whether it's IT training, or if it's customer service training, or it is a relationship management training, I need to make sure that I understand in terms of their strengths and their weaknesses, where you sit down and have conversations, where you're taking now you taking reports on individuals and making sure that you have now an analysis to say this is where the person is lacking, or this is where they're strong, or where we don't need to actually use any resources and only invest in the places where you find that an employee is weak. Sorry, let me mute from my side. I hear there's a sound, right? And then it says that that you need to make sure that through your training and development, that especially in the public sector, that you need to make sure that when you're managing your employees, right, it also motivates them. Because remember, if you're working with people and as a leader or as an HR, you're failing to motivate those people, then they're not open or willing to want to go for training, because already they have a negative mindset towards the organization or towards your management skills or just the team as a whole. So you need to make sure that whatever you're doing, your employees remain motivated in the process, right? So you need to always make sure that you're speaking to your employees, you're finding out in terms of where they need that that push, where do they need that support from management, so that at least it helps them to try and now decide what is the training that is needed, how do I then progress in terms of my career, what career do I want to follow? Because a person will only want to push in terms of their career progression if they feel motivated to stay within the roles that you've put them within the public sector. Are we together, guys?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Yes, we are together.
Yes.
So also looking at training and development, right, to say that it plays an important role in terms of upskilling your staff within your organizations, in terms of, one, how do they improve in the work that they're doing, their capabilities, and how they remain engaged in organizations. So remember, when you're training, it's to also make your employees understand what is the purpose of the training, what how does it fit in terms of the objectives of the organizations, objectives of the individuals, and what the team wants to achieve as a whole. So once you've given that platform and people understand in terms of why we're doing this training and development, then it's easier for them to then have a clearer view in terms of what does it help me with, how does it then help me in my growth, what does me getting additional skill do in terms of my development as a person. And then also, remember, when you're having conversations, you're creating platforms for relationships, right? Work relationship, guys, not personal relationships or relationships, the other relationships. But to say that you're creating relationships that we can then rely on in terms of, workspace. Remember, in terms of relationship management, once you have those conversations and employees see that there's a platform where there's open communication, where you can still access when you need that support from your teams, from your management, then it keeps them engaged, and that from there they're able now to stay motivated and want to do their work. So it's very important now when you're speaking to employees that they understand what is the reason for us actually doing this training and development. How does it then benefit me as a person? From you understanding now in terms of the practices that you have to go through when you're looking at training and development, what you want to achieve, what is the basis of you actually wanting to conduct training and development, is to understand now that from the different levels that we're operating in public sector, right? Now, when you do those assessments for employees, remember, before you diagnose a person in terms of their training needs, right? You're supposed to do assessment to say, okay, where do we find that lack within an employee? What do I need to make sure that I can pick up, or what do I need to remedy for an employee, right? So make sure you do an analysis of every employee. You do an assessment and you find out where are the areas of that I need to target when it comes to an employee, and then where do they need to improve on? Because remember, when you do an analysis of a person, it gives you now the areas where you see there's that lack. So what you're trying to say, okay, what do you want to improve on from public sector, right? Public sector has seen different areas or challenges that the employees facing, but once you've gone through training and development, it aims, right, to try and say, okay, let's try and change in terms of service delivery of our employees. What do they understand? What it means in terms of dealing with our communities and delivering according to our promise. When you go back to your Batapele principles, the 8 principles, where we're here to serve and people first, right? To say, okay, what are we trying to achieve as a public unit? To say, okay, in terms of improving service delivery, having service ethos, what are the ethos that we're following? What's the foundation of the work that we're going to be doing as a team, and what we have promised our clients or the society as a whole to deliver on, right? Also creating cost-effective structures within our organizations, to say, from us training our people and giving them that knowledge and then upskilling them, right? We're trying to make sure that we're cutting down in terms of wastage, because remember, if a person doesn't have the right know-how or technical base in terms of performing their different roles, it then affects how they then go and conduct themselves when they're doing certain jobs, and we might find that we're having a lot of wastage or spillage depending on the job that a person is doing, because they're making so many errors, right? So once we have trained those people, we're trying to give a basis of saying, okay, let's also look at how we can help in terms of our units being more cost effective, right? Building institution building and management within our departments, right? Where we're trying to grow the different divisions that we have. Whatever we're doing, it's there to make sure that we grow our organizations, our units, and we see that progression in terms of where the unit was before and where it's going. Where if before we could only service maybe 1,000 clients, maybe with us getting training and the understanding and upskilling our employees, then they can now build that unit and maybe serve about 2,500 clients. So with that training, we need to make sure that whatever we're doing speaks to building our units and whatever we're delivering on when it comes to the outside world. Affirmative action, make sure that whatever we've set in terms of our goals when it comes to training and development, it also helps in also improving, right, the area of affirmative actions, where we've said this is a designated group that we said we want to make sure that we improve on from the previously disadvantaged people. Let's make sure that we we help this section so that they also help in terms of building the economy and also reducing those elements of unemployment and poverty within our nation, which are some of the goals that we as public sector have to look at. And then just looking at accountability, because remember, when you're sitting with a person and actually taking them through in terms of what is expected from them understanding their job and where you're supposed to train them, right? You're also increasing in terms of accountability, where a person now is able to say, this is my role, this is what I'm supposed to understand and be able to do when it comes to my job. So if I am failing, right, I should be able to be accountable for my role and then be able to raise to say, you know what, this is my fault, this is where I lacked, or this is where I messed up. And if there's any remedial that should be done, is then taken, because the person is now learning accountability. Because you might find most of the time within organizations, people don't take on that responsibility to say, this is my job, this is my area or my sphere that I should cover. So if anything goes wrong, no one is able to come up and say, you know what, this is part of my management, or it's part of my job responsibility. I should have done ABC. This is why we failed to reach our targets. So when you're looking at the practices, it just helps in terms of understanding what are the bases of you wanting to do training and development, what you should look at the end of the day that you want to achieve as an organization, as a unit, when you are trying to implement training and development. From your organization, guys, what are some of the training methods have you used within your organizations? What have they adopted when it comes to training for the employees? What do they use from what you've seen? Guys from your organizations?
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, in my workplace, there's workplace skill programs, whereby they will get the portfolio of the employees. Then afterwards, there are some skills within the department. We have different departments whereby the department will refer you to go and upskill the knowledge that we are having maybe in a particular department. That's how that's how it goes most of the time.
But so remember, with your workman skills plan, right? So it just guides in terms of the training that's needed, right, for the different individuals to say, this is where in the future we're looking to make sure that we train our employees. But with the training, do they then say, okay, this is the type of training that these individuals are going to get? Are they going to get either it's the internal training, on the job training? Are we going to do external? Are they going to get coaching? What are the different methods that they then use?
Yeah, they use the external service providers to come and give training to the employees. Yeah, that's normally what they do.
All right. Thanks a lot, Richard. The other guys, what?
Lala.
Yes, Israel.
Yeah. Mine would be I'm involved in teacher training.
Okay.
I'm working for teacher development. What we normally use, there is a system that we're using, what we call is a diagnostic self-assessment, which identify teachers' content knowledge and methodology in different subjects. From there, the system will have to analyze the results from the system, which will tell where exactly that teacher is lacking. Then we'll either do e-coaching by subject advisors and curriculum coordinator. With the newly appointed teachers, we start with induction. We go through the mentorship program. That is, we identify senior educators or master educators to be mentors to those educators. And we also provide in-house training And we're also having ways partners that are collaborating with us in providing professional development. And also the skills audit that is mandatory. Also assist us when we analyze the results, when the people who are conducting, normally the external people, when we get a report and we analyze so that we see and we develop a training plan to address those needs. Either we outsource or we refer teachers to formal training courses. Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot, Cesar. Thank you, guys. Just to add to say, within your training and development, guys, to say that once you're trying to determine what type of training is needed for an employee, for individuals within your organizations, is you'd have to then conduct a needs analysis where you look at employees' current status, current skills, current understanding and capabilities, right? And try and narrow down from their strengths and their weaknesses, where is that gap? Where do you think they need training, so that you're able to then do individual development plan for an employee. So you need to make sure that you've done a needs analysis for your employees. Depending on how it's conducted within your organizations, every organization will do it differently, right? Some have certain structures that they follow depending with how each organization does it. But should you be in that area where you have to then take on that role or manage that responsibility, to say that to make it easier to now channel in terms of the training that you need to then training programs that you need to put up for your employees, and then for you to also work on a budget, because remember, once you're looking at training, it involves a cost, right? So for you to also narrow down, say, okay, what type of training am I going to give the employee? What is it going to be, internal, external? Am I going to use on-the-job training? Am I going to make sure I use internal coaches? What do we have? Because remember, you also need to look at your internal strength as an organization, from where the needs are for the employees, who within your structures is actually capable of taking on that person and able to train them. So once you've done that analysis and are able to then say, we'll be able to do it internally and cut on costs. But remember also the cost, you then have to try and weigh out to say, if a person is away from their work doing coaching a person, what is it? What's the repercussion in terms of their productivity on their main objectives, right? What does it affect? What is the monetary value of that in comparison to me actually sending that person to go to an external provider and get the training? You then have to do that evaluation for the organization so that you're able to guide them in terms of decision making when you're now saying in terms of the training needs of the organization. This is what we suggest for the individuals that need to go for training, and also looking, is the training in alignment? I remember someone mentioned that you're only allowed to do training that's aligned to your career plan according to what the organization has set for you within their structures. So it needs to be aligned to that. If it's anything that's outside, that means the organization is not going to conduct that training for you, or even sponsor that training. So you need to make sure from you deciding on the training that your employees are going to be getting from your skills plans, to say that how is it aligned to the objectives of the organizations? How does it fit to what the organization wants to achieve at the end of the day? Thank you, everybody. From there, you will see that it talks about how these training and development practices, right? How training and development then contributes to receive, achieving goals of your organizations or for your department. To say what is the purpose of you actually doing this training, right? To say you're trying to link in terms of what you want to achieve on a strategic level, right? Say this is what our objectives are as an organization. This is what we need from the employees. In us trying to reach those different objectives of transformation, of service delivery that we've set in terms of our goals as the department, training and development will help now in terms of now equipping the employees, getting to the level that we need them in terms of the different requirements that we need from them. So remember, from your job description, from you understanding what an employee is supposed to do, or the employee also having an understanding of your expectations as an organization, they're able then to link what they're supposed to do according to the training that they need as individuals, and you as an employer are able also to detect, to say what is the training that is going to help in terms of these different goals that we have for our organization, depending on where you fall in your departments. The different departments have different goals in alignment to what the country wants to achieve as a whole. But from whatever we're doing, it has to speak now to the overall goals of the departments, and also looking at how do we make sure that from the employee side that they're also increasing or elevating in terms of how their training or the trainers are getting more experience in their different spheres of expertise, right? To say that make sure that whoever we're putting in this place have to have the right experience, right understanding, so that they're able now to perform those different trainings, be able to make sure that they get effective results from training our employees. And also in that, remember we mentioned that whatever we're doing as HR, as managers that are managing this process, is to look at what is the cost impact for running this process. Whatever, because we sit with budgets, right? Even if you have budgets that we've been allocated, we're not supposed to exhaust those budgets, because we need to be in a habit of trying to save public funds and not exhaust the budget that we're given. So whatever we're doing, we're trying to make sure that we're promoting cost effectiveness. We're also increasing in terms of how we promote quality service within our public sector. How do we also improve accountability, right? Because remember, with different areas in public sector, we've had issues where people don't take ownership when it comes to when projects don't fall through, or we miss deadlines, or we're unable to deliver in terms of expectations from our departments. So then it's very important that once we've taken them through training, they're then able to learn some of these different spheres that will help them in terms of their service delivery, them being able to be accountable for the roles that they've been given to be responsible for. Are you guys still there?
Yes, we're here.
Yes.
Yeah, boy, yes.
All right. Just also adding to say that it also helps in terms of creating, the platforms for having standards that we adhere to as a public sector, to say once we've done training and everybody understands in terms of where we're going as a unit and what we want to achieve and the level of service that we want to deliver, right? It helps everybody now work towards to say, okay, in terms of the standards that we want to achieve, right? Because we've been given the platform and the resources where we've been trained and been equipped to be able to go and perform our jobs, then it makes it easier for employees now to maintain those standards. Because remember, those standards create a reputation that will follow our different divisions or units, right? So if we maintain people that are actually able to fulfill those expected standards, then it makes it easier in terms of meeting the goals of our different divisions. Any questions from your side, guys? In terms
No
of
question from me.
Okay, so just remember to say that in terms of the training and development, right, to say what is the main purpose for you actually conducting that for your unit, right? Because whatever you're doing, it has to have a purpose and what you want to achieve from doing that. So once because remember, when you're trying to get management on board in terms of your training and development plan, to say you're supposed to give them an indication in terms of how is it going to speak to the objectives of the organization? What is the goal of us actually trying to conduct this training? How does it feed into what the organization wants to achieve? Once you're able to do that, it's easier to get everybody on board. Because remember, in terms of decision making, we have stakeholders that have to come and give a go ahead when it comes to approvals on training, right? So once they understand in terms of this is what it's going to speak to when it comes to what we want to achieve, right? Well, this is the intention of us actually having this training, then it's easier for someone to then sign on the dotted line to say, okay, do I approve in terms of what this training wants to achieve? What is it speaking into, right? Is it helping in terms of growth of the employees? Is it speaking in terms of what we've set in terms of our goals as an organization when we said, okay, we need to make sure that we develop a certain percentage of our, when speaking of affirmative action, right? And how does it speak to that? Is it in alignment in terms of what we set out as our the employees' career paths? How does it feed into the objectives of the organization and into the overall individual objectives of the employees and their performance? Because whatever we're doing then will help in terms of performance of the individuals and how it would feed into the overall performance of the organization. So you see that from the training and development practice, it's a very small area, but it just helps you in terms of understanding the basis of what training development practices are, what you should follow in terms of you coming up with your training and development practices, and then how training and development then contributes to the overall objectives of the organization and what it aims to achieve at the end of the day. You guys are too quiet. How often, guys, okay, before we move on to the next section, right? Because I enjoy hearing you guys' ideas because you guys are actually in the field and experience this on a daily. From how often do you guys conduct trainings for employees? Is it a culture that you follow on a regular, to say at least every interval, at some point, we should make sure that people are going through refresher training? Or, yes, Nomlebo, sorry. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Hi, Lala.
Hi.
It's Namtebo.
So, please repeat that.
Okay. Namtebo.
Nomlebo.
Okay, on my side, it's normally done maybe after a year or after 2 years. I work at finance department and I deal with the public a lot. And then the department which I'm in, we do we're dealing with the public, and then they normally do a training on customer care.
Okay.
Just to remind them how to deal with the public, how to handle conflict and all that. But it's not done every year. And they normally bring external service providers also for training. It's just short courses, then afterwards they get certificates for that. Yeah, only that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. From the other guys? Other guys? Or what training maybe would you want to see happening within your organizations?
Yes, Lala, Sizwe.
Yes, Sizwe.
Yeah, with us in the Department of Education, it happens regularly, depending on the nature of programs that are being introduced. When you look at that perspective, where we have to train a project team for a particular program, a project, it means as the need arises firstly, and secondly, there is regular training for all newly appointed managers, because each and every year when the vacancies come, we have to recruit people, promote them, and we train them. And when you follow the performance management evaluation, you must account about training that you have undertaken to address your skills gap, and means there is a mandatory annual training that you need to take, either informally or formally. And for teachers, there is a policy on continuous professional teacher developments where they accumulate points, and they must be accredited by the Council for Educators. And there are points that you must accumulate. Then that is evaluated after a 3-year cycle, and it's mandatory that you must each and every year make sure that you have accumulated certain points. Then it compels teachers to at least a year to have attended any form of formal or informal training. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Sizwe. So from those CPD points that they're supposed to attain, right? If a person doesn't manage to achieve the points, right, before before they have to go for training, what then happens? So they have to wait when that cycle is over. And if a person beyond that training, right, when you're looking at their performance, once they've conducted that training and they don't change in terms of their performance, what then happens to those teachers?
Firstly, let me speak to the issue of points accumulated through the CPTD system, management system. There is an intention, because we're piloting right now, to have a penalty. Some people are saying, let us not go to the penalty level, because the penalty will be the review and the revoking of a SACE certificate that allows you to teach, because it means that you have not grown in your profession and you are stifling the development of kids. It's a practice in most countries, but within us, we're still debating it with the stakeholders. And then there is using of points for selection of personnel to be promoted. In certain provinces, it's mandatory to say after your interview, the selection committee will also refer to the points that you have accumulated in terms of professional development, since professional development is one of the criteria when they're interviewing you to show that you have professionally grown in your area. Then also, when you deal with issues of underperformance, let me make an example to say, the output of education is seen through learner attainment. If there is a poor pass rate in matric and that teacher is responsible for that particular subject, or that principal is responsible for that institution, they look at various areas when trying to address issues to say, was it deliberate? If the teacher has not been attending courses, it means there is a deliberate intention to have poor performance. Then there must be consequence management. But if there've been exposure to training and any other development session, it means the underperformance or poor performance that is obtained from that teacher or manager is not intentional. Then you need to come with a very not harsh measures to address the poor performance. But people who have not complied with training, then the question of consequence management to address poor performance is harsh there. We revoke the provision of the Act that is personal administrative measures in terms of misconduct and other stuff. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Cisse, for just giving us that context from the education side. Is there anybody else? So guys, take it away from education, right? On a lighter note. So do you think it's fair when you're looking at how most of the time, surely for the football lovers, to say when a team fails, right, it's the coach that goes, not the players? Do you think it's fair in terms of that process? Or you guys don't watch football?
It's
No,
not fair.
not fair. Should come from both sides.
Yes, whoever didn't score, whoever's responsible for scoring should go, right? Because you've done your job as a coach, as a manager for teams. But yeah, they understand the process that they follow when it comes to management of their teams. Sorry, guys, I don't know how this thing skipped. Just thanks everybody. Just in to close off when it comes to training employment practices, to say that once you've done that needs analysis for your employees and understand in terms of where they're lacking when it comes to their capabilities, right? This is what then motivates the need for training and development, to say you need to make sure that you follow a process to be able to arrive to say that why does a person need training and development? What have I done? How have I managed to see that there is a gap in terms of their capabilities, right? Because at the end of the day, you're trying to make sure that a person is able to perform according to the level that you need for them to meet the objective of the organization. So in you trying to narrow that gap, it helps you now understand in terms of what is the training that a person needs for you to get to that end result. Okay. And then here it also says that managers, I think you mentioned that earlier on, right? They need to take an ethical approach in terms of how they unlock human potential. Because remember, all our employees sit with different capabilities, and sometimes we have to find what is the right way and use the best practices when it comes to making sure that we unlock a person's potential. Because sometimes you find that some managers might use force in terms of trying to get people to do certain work or force them to do certain trainings. But if you follow now an ethical approach in terms of how you're going to make sure a person gets into that into that mindset of saying I need to go for training. This is the purpose of me getting the training. This is what it was going to help. It also helps in terms of them unleashing other areas where they actually might excel when it comes to their capabilities. So it's very important in terms of how we then approach employees and how we conduct in terms of why they need that training. All right. And then lastly, it says whatever that human resource has to do when it comes to public sector, right? You need to make sure that it speaks to what the Vision 2030 of the development of the government says, from the National Development Plan, to say every different department has goals that they're supposed to fulfill in terms of that plan. So when you're looking at your organizations, or whether it's Department of Health, whether it's education, where do you fall in within that that plan, and how do you make sure that whatever you do when it comes to the people element, right, it feeds into fulfilling the needs of that development plan. So whatever you're doing, you have to align it, right? It has to make sure that it speaks to the mother body, which is what the country wants to achieve at the end of the day. So in the individual units that we are in, our schools, in our different hospitals, in our different spheres within the public sector, whatever we're doing, we're supposed to say that from the management level, right, depending on how then these objectives are then trickled down to the employees, and coming up with strategies for our divisions. Do we actually align it to what we want to achieve as a nation? How does it speak to the overall objective of the nation? So whatever we're doing has to speak to that, and in our strategies, it has to be aligned in us meeting the objectives of the country at the end of the day. And 2030 is around the corner. We're about 8 years away, right? It's 2022. Yeah, we're 8 years away, and yeah, hopefully by the time we get to then, we would have managed to at least fulfill some of the goals of that development plan for the nation, and be able to then grow from there and achieve the transformation that the nation has been looking to achieve for the last, I think it's been, when was it developed, guys? Was it 20 years ago? So 2001, I can't remember when this was enforced. But if anyone remembers in terms of when Vision 2030 was enforced, to see how many years it's gone and what's the progression, has there been any success in any of the spheres? But looking at, so we come to the end of our training and development practices, guys. So just make sure for every section that we go through, at your own time, when we're done with the session, just go back and just go through, so that you also read and have your own understanding. Because normally during this session, sometimes we might only grasp a few things, but when we're reading on our own, we're able to then understand in a better context what each term is, and what is the different areas that the different concepts will be covering. We're now moving, guys, to section 756, which looks at career and career planning for our teams, right? To understand what is career planning within organizations, what do we do it for normally? Because we find that from yesterday's conversations that some organizations actually don't motivate or get people to actually sit down and look at how their careers will progress, right? It's just you getting to do a job, and they're putting you in into responsibilities because that's where the need for the organization is. But when you're looking at not actually doing career planning, that maybe is not eminent in some of our organizations. But it's then comes that once you have had that exposure and knowing of what career planning is about, or how a person should then sit down and have their own career plan, how it then feeds into what the organization meeting its objective, and a person also meeting their goals. Because remember, as an individual, once you join an organization, remember you're working towards two sets of goals: your personal goals and the organization's goals, right? And your goals need to feed into what the organization wants to achieve at the end of the day. So in you trying to align those two, this is where you then look at your career to say, within that organization, how do I make sure that I also grow my career? How do I grow within this organization? How do I make sure that I'm able to develop myself with the different roles that I'm going to be given within this this institution that I'm part of? From how many of you have managed within the organization to actually move or elevate into future roles that are in line with their career path? Where maybe if you was an intern in a certain department, you managed now get into a certain role, and from that role, you've gone on to maybe become a leader within that sphere and become a manager. Who's managed to progress within their stipulated career plans? Guys, are we not progressing?
Are we not what?
Are we not progressing in terms of our careers in our organizations? Who's managed to at least grow from when, if in the organization that they are in, or even from before, where you've said, okay, in terms of my career, I've set out, this is where I know Lehlongonola yesterday said he's worked on a plan for himself and he's following through, and it's actually it's coming to realization. But for the other guys, who's managed within your current organization to actually progress in terms of their careers?
Hey, Lala.
Yes.
When I started in the business where I'm currently working in, I started working as a help desk consultant, and they moved me to the finance department after 4 years.
Did they sit and say, let's move you there because we see there's
Oh,
potential?
the reason why I managed to, okay, I requested to move, or to, there was a position that was available. And then because I think based on my performance, and I was also studying, they didn't have a problem when I approached my manager, to the finance manager, to apply for the position. But then there was no interview, like from, as it was not an external position. So for me, it was, I cannot, I'm not sure if it's a development or what, but yes, I did move from the different departments.
Okay, so from you getting into finance, is it now you've looked and said, I actually want to grow within the finance arena, or you're open to say, if there's a role, I will go into this that's not in finance, or you've said, I'm going to stick into finance and progress in finance?
Since I was also studying finance, accounting and finance on the course that I was doing, there was 2 modules for finance, and I was willing to learn more, like to learn more on the part of finance, and also to grow within the company.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Tabisile, and congratulations on that progression, and all the other guys that have managed to progress with their careers, and everybody else. Just going now in terms of what the different terms mean, because remember, we're supposed to also go back and see what the textbook says when it comes to this definition, so at least we're able to distinguish what each word means, right? When you're looking at a career, right, it means the different positions. So your positions are the different jobs that you've taken up, right, over the various years as a person. So if like like Tabisile was saying, to say that she was first at help desk, right, and then now she's moved into finance, maybe next she's moving into director, or what is her career been like? What are the different positions that she's held in that organization? That's what we then look at. This is the career that I've taken, right? And then career planning then would look at what is that process that you follow when someone then looks at what are my capabilities. Because remember, when you're looking at your career planning, you need to look at, okay, what are the skills that I have, right, depending on the role, what are my interests? Because remember, in terms of your career path, it's also driven by your interests and the knowledge that you have. Because sometimes, yes, you get into a role because, sorry, into a position because that's what's available, right? But when you're now looking at where are your interests, right? Maybe you're sitting in a medical job, but that was, you went there because that's where you studied, you're forced to study that. But in terms of your interest, you might find that, oh no, that person actually was interested in media. Now you actually want to change and go into a different sphere, right? So you then have to then look at, okay, what are the interests of that person? What is the knowledge that they have, right? What motivates them in terms of them doing certain work, so that it enables you to gather enough information so that when you're sitting now and planning with an employee to say, or even planning for yourself to say, okay, now let me sit down and say, this is where I want to go. It's going to be based on what criteria? Because remember, when you're doing your career planning, right, either you're doing it on your own or you're sitting with an organization where they're saying to you that, okay, let's decide how this person is going to grow within our organization. But in those decisions, whether you're sitting on your own, you then have to sit down and say, from the different elements that I'm going to base my career planning on, what am I going to use, right? Am I going to use my skills? Am I going to use the knowledge that I have? Am I going to use my qualifications? Am I going to use the interest that I have, right? What are the goals that the person has in terms of their careers, so that it's easier for you to then set to say, okay, this is where that person wants to go. Now let me try and create a path in terms of what has to be followed for that person so that they get to the position that they're looking for or they're aiming to get to. So it's for everybody, even on a personal, just try from time to time, just map out in terms of where do I want to see myself, what progression do I want to see in terms of where I am in an organization, whether you're in charge of people, always sometimes sit, because remember, yes, HR will sit with this function and supposed to be sitting and doing, some of these functions, but because of maybe they don't have enough people within their teams, they might lack in terms of now sitting down with every team member, with every division of the organizations, and actually mapping out career plans for the employees. Then the employees then should be able to say, okay, let me sit down and actually look at the organization and where I think I can go, looking at where I am, right, and what the organization can offer. Because already, once you've analyzed the structure of the organization and the various levels that you can go into, right, you're able then to say, okay, let me now look at career planning for myself. Let me now devise a path that I'm going to follow for myself, or even just to help your other team members, so that at least they are also working on growing and progressing with the different positions that they hold in organizations. So the responsibility lies also on the individual and the organization, depending on how now the organization is set up and if they have enough resources to actually manage that process. Right. So from Career Center, it says that when it comes to career planning, right, it doesn't stop to say, yes, I've done my career planning now, right, and then that's it. I'll leave it and forget about it. As you're progressing, you always have to go and update and look at what else then what next you want to achieve. Because remember, once you achieve the next level in terms of your progression, right, you're supposed to then say, okay, what now is needed? Where do I now incorporate in terms of what I need to learn? Where do I need to develop? Because remember, as you set out your the career planning for your employees or for yourself, right, you're supposed to then try and pick out to say what additional development does this person need, what training is needed for them to get to where that person needs to be. So let's say we have an administrator that needs to get to maybe a manager position, right? You already set out and say, in terms of qualifications, this is what's needed. In terms of skills, this is what is needed. In terms of time frame, this is how long it's going to take for a person to get to that level, right? So already you're sitting out and say, okay, what now is needed in terms of them being trained to get to the level that you want them to now obtain the next position in when you're looking at the career progression. So it's very important now that you set it out, and then it helps you come up now with the training plans for that person. Are we okay, guys?
Yes.
Yes, Lala.
So remember, we spoke about performance appraisals where we said it also helps in terms of understanding, right? To say, once we sit down with a person, we're able to look at their career goals, where they want to go, what do they want to achieve in, in terms of their careers, right? So when you're having a career plan, it's now also trying to devise to say, okay, for every employee, right, from the appraisal part, how do I make sure that we equip that person with the knowledge, the skill set that they need in terms of them meeting, right, the job that they want to get to or the job that they're doing, so they're able to progress in their careers. So remember, when you're doing your performance appraisals, also have conversations where you're devising a career plan for your employees, where you actually have from the documentation, because remember, when you're doing your appraisals, there are documents that each organization will come up with in terms of what questions you're going to ask and what areas of concern that you want to make sure that you address, right? So ideally, you should then also have that conversation where you're saying, in terms of now your career plan, let's now look at where you are, where your performance is sitting, right? Where we need to develop you as an employee, so that we speak into now, what is your career plan? What do you want to achieve at the end of the day? So that it helps now in terms of developing our employees. Because as the organization is aiming to meet its objective, it needs to make sure that its employees are also growing, because it has to be two-way, that the organization is growing, the employees are also growing from their side. So at least when the employee sees that there's growth in terms of their careers, right, they're now motivated to say, okay, let me actually now work harder in terms of me trying to meet the objectives of the organization, working towards the goals that have been given for this department, and also how do I make sure that I also grow in that process in line with what I want to achieve at the end of the day in terms of my career. Okay, guys, if when we earlier on, I think yesterday we spoke about expectations, but when you look at what you're learning now, how does it fit into your career paths? If anyone wants to share, so this is where I've seen this is going to go and help me in terms of where my career is going. Anyone? Even if you were pushed to go and study by your organizations, but if you look at it when you say, okay, what's the benefit actually in terms of where my career is going? Who has managed to do that alignment?
Lala?
Yes, George?
It's Zita. May I come in?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. With me, here's the situation. I've been in local government for quite a very long time, almost 20 years. And I'm having a national diploma. Now, the problem that made me to have an intention of advancing my qualification is that most of the senior positions advertised, the requirement is NQF level 7, and I'm at NQF level 6. So in terms of knowledge and experience, I'm fine. But now in terms of the paper, I'm not fine. So that's why I find myself now doing this course, so that I managed to get the NQF level 7. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Richard, for sharing that.
It's not Richard.
So is Zeta.
No.
Zeta. Sorry, Zeta. At least you've seen in terms of what you need, and you've narrowed down to say, for me to actually get to the next level, because you've already set out to say, in terms of my progression, I should be at this level, and this is the requirements, right, in terms of my development that I need to get to the next job. Anybody else?
Yeah, it's Richard. I think,
Richard.
yeah, the latter speaker, I think I'm sharing the very same experience with him. But yes, I'm still in the local government currently as I speak. So I had a national diploma in public administration then, but due to lack of work, then I started as a bus driver. Then I progressed to an inspector. And then currently I'm working as a operations officer. But yeah, similar to me, currently now I've got the national diploma. Then the position of a manager, it requires a level 7. That's why maybe I'm trying my luck to see if ever I can clinch that level, so that whenever there's an opportunity in line with my employment, then I can be in that position. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's very good, guys. Understanding in terms of where do I want to be, setting goals for yourselves in terms of your careers and working to say that this is what I actually need to go and get myself to get to that position. It then makes it easier, even for organizations, when they see that determination or motivation of employees to say we're actually getting people that are willing to go and get the requirements of different positions and are still motivated to want to work for departments, then that also shows that, in terms of organizations, how do they then come in and help their employees in some situations where they can actually go and contribute towards that growth. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for sharing, right? That is, okay, yes, George? George, go ahead.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much. I also find myself working at TVET College, and I did a civil national diploma in civil. And when we check HR, the way they support according to the skills which they want to develop, they were always saying it must align to the apprenticeship students in our college. And then when I start to be doing a coordinator on the skills, now I found myself have that opportunity because I want to go through that line of project management. Now, when I apply, I also put that I'm doing this, it needs more project management than that teaching qualification. I also did that teaching qualifications, but I wanted to enhance my career to what it links to my civil. But now, as I'm doing this course now, I can see that it's going where I was planning to go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, George, for sharing that and, being open in terms of what you guys are working on and what has led you in terms of you deciding to study further. Sorry, guys, let me just put in my charger. Thank you all for sharing. So when you look at the sections, right, you see that from training and development practices to career planning, right, it all touches in terms of how we develop our employees and also in terms of what is the importance of training and development. Why do we want to make sure we incorporate it in our processes, in our departments? What is the reason that employees have to go and train? What are the options or methods that we can look at in terms of training our employees? How do we then arrive at saying this is the sort of training that an employee should undertake, right? From conducting a needs analysis, you will see that as you're going through section 7.57, where you can go and do reading on your own, to say that you follow a process to understand why do we need to do training, why then from there, when you're sitting with employees, how do I conduct a needs analysis for an employee to come and with the end result of the training that a person should have, or should we incorporate in a person's development, right? from this, what are the different options we have in terms of training, whether it's in-house training, it's external training, are we going to conduct coaching, mentoring, what are the options that we're going to select within our organizations, looking at the need of that employee? Because remember, from your needs analysis, everybody comes up with a different need from the gap that you then analyze or you find as an end result. So from there, you're able then to decide from the different methods that you have, which one then speaks to trying to minimize that gap that a person has shown in terms of their need for training. You're able then to come up with the best solution in terms of the training that you're supposed to give for a person. From there, right, it then helps with the development of your organizations. Whatever you're doing, right, it has to speak to how do we then make sure we equip the employees, right, to be able to meet objectives of our departments from one, their performance, their capabilities, the objectives and the goals that we're giving our employees. At the end of the day, whatever we're doing has to be aligned to say what we invest in the employee has to speak to now the ulterior goal that we have for organizations. What have we set out for that employee? What objective have we said they need to make sure that they meet? And from your whatever you're doing, right, remember you have to give it a timeline, right, where you go to your SMART goals to say whatever you're doing has to be broken down to say, okay, have you actually communicated to the person and they understand the specifics of it, right? What is the time frame of the goals that you've set of your training? When do you want that person to have achieved that goal? Remember, when you're doing your career plan, say if a person has to go and progress to a certain role, in what period do they have in terms of when they're supposed to train? By when should they come back to you and say, I've managed to achieve my qualification, now I'm ready for the next role, right? Always make sure that you whatever you discuss with your employees, you set out in black and white and set goals that you can actually go and then review and actually be able to measure them to say, okay, you've actually managed to achieve this training based on one, you've met this need, you've managed to acquire this skill, you've done this in a certain period that you've all would have agreed on. Because whatever you're doing in terms of your training, you have to make sure that when you're speaking to the teams and even executives to say that what is the time that we're going to put on this, to give feedback, to say, okay, we've done this, we've invested our money, we've used public funds to invest in our employees. Now let's look at now how we're going to get that return on investment when it comes to what the employees are going to now bring into the organizations after they've gone beyond the training that they've received. So make sure that you follow a process, you have a policy that you have in your organizations that will be able to guide you when it comes to one, how do you set out career plans for your organization? What is how do you do training and development for your employees? What are the intervals that your policy says when it stipulates when you should be doing any development efforts for your employees? I just want to, okay, from there, right? It's just the end of that section, okay? Just make sure you go read further, guys, on section 4, 5, no, it's 5, 6, and 7, right? When training and career planning, right? I just want to reiterate in terms of when you're looking at your POE, guys, right? To say from your POE, I know it's a couple of pages, right? We won't say how many pages they are, but it's a lot of pages. But just make sure, guys, that every part that needs you to fill in something, make sure you fill it in. Where it needs you to sign, make sure you sign, right? Where you're giving an answer, it wants you to give a comment, please put in as much information that you can put, right? That you feel is substantial. At least don't ideally put one line comments, because remember, with the different levels, they expect you to now be able to also express yourself in more words, in more detail, right, to substantiate the answers that you're putting. So give as much info that you can on your POEs to just support the answers and, the marks, because you see from marks will also guide you in terms of the content you should put for for every feedback that you're putting on your POEs. So just make sure that you give substantial information, you give information that's also relevant to the marks. Because I always say when I'm doing any assignment, right, I look at what is the mark allocation, how much content should I put there for me to be awarded that full mark. Because ideally you're looking for the full mark, whether it's 10 marks, it's 5 marks, you're aiming to get all the marks so that at least you pass this stage and go to the next stage, which hopefully you guys will be then going to do your postgrads or your masters, depending on your goals in terms of your careers and education. But just make sure, guys, POE, do not leave anything. So give yourself enough time, right? Where you sit down and fill in that form, because I know it's got a couple of pages, a few pages, right? But just make sure you don't miss anything within what the expectations are or what it requires from your formatives, from your summatives, to your practical activities. Every part that it requires you sign, initial, give where it says you're supposed to give what is this? I think authority that you want to be assessed. Make sure you sign off on that part, because there's a part that says to you when you're going through your period where you're supposed to say you're allowing your assessor and moderator to actually assess you, right? Make sure you sign off that, because then you're giving them permission to say, okay, go ahead and mark my POE. So anything that says candidate fill in, please do not miss it. Okay, give yourself enough time to fill it, to fill in the POE and complete every part that needs your dotted line. And don't wait to do it last minute, because last minute, that's when you miss pages and now you're just rushing through so that you want to submit. So just take note of your submission dates, right? To see when you're supposed to submit your POE, and then fill in everything that has to be filled in that POE. It's for your benefit at the end of the day, and you don't want to have to repeat the same process. Just do it once perfectly and then you move on to the next stage. I want to put you guys into just 30 minutes into groups, right? Just to look at, so that you guys can discuss. By the time you're going home or you're sitting on your own and fully working on your POE, at least you'll be bouncing off the ideas that you would have discussed in your group. So at least you guys able to share ideas, right? So from the sections that we've completed right today, you're supposed to be doing formative activity 5, 6, and 7, okay? From your POEs, right? I'm going to put you into groups. Just try and touch and see from each other's, thought processes, how everybody is going to tackle those different questions, where maybe if you don't have an understanding, then you can always come back and say, okay, this part we're not clear. But I want you in your groups to start, tapping off each other's ideas and try and see how you're going to be tackling that POE depending on the section of 5, 6, and 7. Is that fine with everybody? So that you guys can also discuss in the groups. You don't feel alone by the time you're doing your POE. Are we okay with that, guys?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to put you in groups just for 30 minutes. Just go through those sections. Even if you want to go through the other ones we went through yesterday, just go through them and just see how everybody is going to approach them. Hold on, let me put you in groups. And then after that, then you're free. After the 30 minutes, we'll just then close off, and then you can go and start reading and, working on filling your POEs. Just give me a moment, guys. Yes, Sita?
Yeah. I just want to check something here. Because I'm at work, so I had some times when I was just away a bit. Before we went on lunch, there was a request from one of our colleagues about the information that might come from Mr. Butali. I don't know whether he managed to come in while I was away.
No, he hasn't. I tried to call the office, but haven't gotten feedback. So hopefully when we finish the session, I'll be able, because I'm not in the office. So I'll have to try and find somebody that can maybe go and see if he's there or not. Because I try to call him directly. But hopefully, yeah, but I'll try to find somebody that can maybe physically go and I can speak to him over the phone.
Thank you.
Okay.